Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to meeting one of the Special Committee on Governance. A welcome to the members of council present and visiting members of council. For those in the room with us, the screen at the back of the room provides real-time updates concerning where we are in the agenda and what is coming next. You can follow the agenda and debate on your computer, tablet, or smartphone at www.toronto.ca/council. We acknowledge the land that we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I will now ask if there are any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, we will now run through the agenda. The first item is GV 1.1, Election of Vice Chair, Special Committee on Governance. And we are going to hold that for procedure. Second item is GV 1.2, which is public input on City Council's governance system for 26 members. We're going to hold that for speakers. And the final item is GV 1.3, request for report on implementation of term limits. We'll be holding that for speakers. We'll now go to the first item. GV 1.1, Election of Vice Chair, Special Committee on Governance. And I have a script, thanks to the clerks. We'll go through that. Are there any nominations for Vice Chair of the Special Committee on Governance? We'll start with Councillor Carroll.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Perks.
Okay. Are there any further nominations? Thank you. So, members Perks and members Crawford, do you wish to address the committee? You will each have 5 minutes to address the committee, starting with Councillor Perks first.
Oh, come on, guys.
I'm going to withdraw my name if that's okay. And I think I don't want to get into this going back and forth, but I'm quite comfortable to support Councillor Perks as Vice Chair.
Okay. All right. Seeing that there's only one nomination.
You just have to be good to me on Twitter. That's all for a couple days.
Yeah. Seeing that there's only one nomination, then it would be Councillor Perks. Do we have to check if he accepts the nomination? You have accepted it, absolutely. All right. Then that is, congratulations, Councillor Perks. And you as well. All right, we're on to GV 1.2, which is the public input on City Council's governance system for 26 members. It has been held for speakers. And our first speaker is Alan Kaspersky. Good morning, Alan. You've got 5 minutes.
Good morning, councillors. The clerk was kind enough to forward, I understand, my submission to you on GV 1.2 called the 3 R's. And I take my inspiration from Aaron and Ben Napier of Laurel, Mississippi. I was watching HGTV of all things, and they talk about redecorating, renovating, and rebuilding. And I think the committee, when it looks at governance in the city, needs to consider those 3 terms. Currently, right now, you've gone through or are going through a process of redecorating. You've renovated your offices, you've hired staff, you've adjusted budgets, you've talked about the structure of committees, ABCs, and citizen appointees. But if that's all you do, your workload is going to more than double, and you understand that far better than I will. So I would suggest we need to look at renovating. I think we need to look at better ways of doing governance in the City of Toronto. I use the example of, and other people use the example of New York and Los Angeles. I use the example of London, England, Greater London. There are 33 boroughs in London. They range in size between 150 and 300,000 people. They each have approximately 50 citizen councillors, borough councillors. They don't get salaries. They get compensated for their work they do. It's anything between £2,000 and £20,000 a year. There are 1,800 politicians in London. Toronto could consider something like that, neighborhood councils, community councils. If you looked at the London model, that might mean something like 10 or 12. Councils of 50 people, citizens, tasked with not only advising you, but they should be tasked with making decisions. Does it make any sense that you folks debate fence exemptions, on-pad parking, removals of trees? It doesn't. My neighbors on my street are better placed to be able to deal with those kind of things. And I would suggest as part of the governance, if you wanted to look to renovate how you do things, the city needs to be more participatory. Third thing, if you really, really wanted to get into governance review, I think you should consider Toronto as a charter city. Why are we here? Because we didn't like Bill 5, we didn't like Bill 31. There's only 25 of you instead of 50, or 47, or 44. And why is that? Because in 1849, the Baldwin Act came into place, which created cities as creatures of the province. Makes no sense in these days. It doesn't make no sense at all. If Toronto was a charter city and had more responsibility for its own governance, its own financial health, perhaps we would have a better city. We have no constitutional right to vote municipally. We do federally and provincially, but municipalities are not a recognized constitutional order of government in this country. So if you really want to look at governance, I'd suggest you look at charter cities. Every 4 years after a municipal election, the provincial government does a review of the Municipal Elections Act. It's mandated. They have to do it. Deputations are made, committee meetings are held, people from across Ontario and the 444 municipalities come together and suggest things. Ranked choice balloting, online voting, boundary reviews are all part of this review. It happens every 4 years. When was the last time that we did a governance review in the City of Toronto? During amalgamation, possibly? In 20 years? Don't know. It should be a regularly mandated discussion, not 5 minutes from myself and the other people in the room. A regularly struck committee that would, not just for the few months after the election, but all along that time. We talked about a participatory budgeting pilot, and it's not going anywhere because staff didn't recommend we continue it. The City of Madrid spends 100 million euros a year on participatory budgeting, 250 to 300 projects a year. Are there ways that we could do governance better in this city? Of course there are. But it needs to be more than just a few minutes at a deputation occasionally. It needs to be an ongoing process, and I would be happy to participate in that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions? Councillor Carroll.
I wonder if you want to expand on that. We just had a meeting yesterday in which participatory budgeting was just a financial issue, but you're actually inserting it here today as a governance issue. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
I've had a number of conversations with the folks in Madrid and people in New York and Chicago. Chicago, each of the city councilors, you probably know, spends $1 million a year on participatory budgeting in their wards. Participatory budgeting was seen by staff as another form of engagement. Town halls, surveys, open houses, that kind of thing. No decision-making was actually, they didn't consider, I believe, that an important part of PB is the decision-making. Turnout at election last year, 40%. The average council support, all of you, 18%. 82% of people didn't support the average councillor. Why? Because you don't get us involved. Engagement is nice, listening to me is nice, and I appreciate it, but put decisions in my hands, in our hands, like trees, like fences, like budgeting, and you'll find we get more involved. So PB certainly is an example of what governance should be. It should be part of our governance. Just the same way that neighborhood council should be part of our governance. That ranked choice voting should be part of our governance. Better ways to encourage democracy, always a good thing. And PB, I think we've had examples of them. I was involved, you know, full disclosure, I'm in Ward 33, the old Ward 33. I don't know what a number is now, 17. And got involved with that. And I appreciated the time, and my idea didn't go through. I supported other people's, but it was a good exercise. I think it should be part of governance. You're welcome.
Thank you. Were there any further questions? No? Thank you for joining us.
Councillors, thank you.
Our next speaker is Dave Nesland. Morning, Dave. You have 5 minutes.
Great, thanks. Thanks for tolerating our parade of the usual suspects. It's great to be here. I won't take up too much of your time. I just wanted to flag a few ideas of things you might want to consider including in the scope of this committee as it proceeds. I'm going to share a chart that I included in my fourth wall exhibit, which I did a few years back. It shows city councilors per 100,000 residents compared to other large cities. And of course, that's before, so now it would be, I guess, something like that. Obviously, this is problematic for those of us who are really focused and interested in how to create a culture of participation and make sure that the political process is inclusive and lots of voices are heard. But let me share another graph, which is perhaps more revealing in a way, because this is separate from how large council is. You could put 700 councillors in the chamber, and it doesn't change this number, which is civic bodies per 100,000 residents. And you can see down here, there's us. Even if you add in the community councils, which most people, let's be honest, don't even know exist, it still is much smaller than 2 other cities, which I just wanted to highlight briefly. And the reason those cities have a better ratio of civic bodies per quantity of residents is that they have a lower tier. Montreal has 19 elected borough councils, separate from the citywide council, and New York City has 59 community boards. These aren't just like residents associations or neighborhood councils like the Los Angeles model. These are actually kind of a lower tier of government that deals with things like parks or bike lanes, local issues that councilors from 30 kilometers probably shouldn't have any say about. If you look at the history of amalgamation in Toronto, we all know what happened in '97 when these 6 red lines were merged. But if you look at the blue ones, that shows how decades before that, there was another round, and before that, another round. So what we've been doing is consistently shrinking the opportunities for citizens to engage in the political process. We've literally shut down over a dozen city halls within the current boundaries of Toronto. So I wanted to encourage you to explore creating some kind of lower tier of government. It can be like the New York model, the Montreal model. I went on a research tour over the last few years for a book, looking at cities that have these lower tiers, and I interviewed people involved with these types of groups, and one word I heard a lot was that this lower tier acts as a conduit or a bridge to municipal government. If you aren't prepared to go that far to create a whole lower tier, then I would encourage you to at least look at cities like Edmonton and LA, which essentially have a organized and funded and supported network of residents associations. there too, people told me that those groups acted as a bridge, as a conduit, and created an opening that they wouldn't have otherwise. And on that note, I wanted to invite all of you on April 6th in the council chambers. I'm organizing Toronto's first ever citywide neighborhood summit with representatives from every neighborhood association in the city, including from all of your wards. If you go to tango.to, you'll see a map of residents associations. We're trying to increase the number of groups on that map, fill in the gaps, make sure that we're including residents groups and tenants associations, not just homeowner associations, but make sure it's really inclusive. And then each of those groups will be invited to send 2 or 3 representatives to the council chambers on April 6th. And if you look at the map now, you'll notice 2 things. One is that a lot of the groups are shaded in gray. I don't know if it's able to put that on the screen, if there's a way to put a web page on the screen. No? Is that possible? That's okay. Anyways, tango.to. A lot of them are gray. Gray means that as far as we can tell, they are dormant, which means 2 or 3 well-intentioned neighbors built a website at some point, but haven't done anything in years, you know, which is great. It's not to dismiss their efforts, but to create a residence group and then not maintain it occupies a space which is disempowering in the long run. But the other thing you'll notice is even aside from the gray groups, a lot of the city doesn't have any residence group at all. Our long-term goal is that anyone can go to tango.to, find their residents association, and that they can get involved, and those groups can act as a conduit. And you could consider ways that you support, oh, sorry, I'm done, thank you.
Thank you.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Questions from members outside the committee? Seeing none. Councillor Perks, you're first on the list.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Helpful as always. So you were talking about 2 different models you found out there, one where there's an elected second tier and one where there's sort of a support for communities.
The distinction wouldn't be elected. The distinction would be jurisdiction. So for example, New York's community boards aren't elected,
right?
But they have real decision-making authority about planning. So Montreal and New York, I consider a lower tier of government, a 4th tier, similar to what we had pre-amalgamation, in a way, if you consider Metro to be what we have now. So it's not about whether they're elected. LA and Edmonton, it's essentially residence groups on steroids. They have funding, they have staff support, they're elected, but they're not really making decisions. They're serving as a conduit between decision makers and residents.
So the distinction is in the formal role, not in the how they get.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm not sure if elections is the best way to. I'm not a big fan of elections, to be honest.
You don't say.
Didn't you run City Idol? Anyway,
I did.
Thank you.
It was a long time ago. I brought with a few copies of the Fourth Wall exhibit, which talks about both of those examples. It has Edmonton and LA on one page and New York and Montreal on another page. I've also brought a few copies, which I'll give to the clerk, of the final report from the Vancouver Mayor's Engaged City Task Force, which has some great ideas you might want to look at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Carroll.
I'm going down the same road. I know you did this research. Have you had a chance to go back and revisit those layers to look at sort of what's a best practice? I ask because if we go out and network, you'll sometimes talk to our counterparts, councillors are going, oh, darn community boards, and well, the mayor went around us and just went to the board. There's grumbling here and there, but we're only talking to our peers. So is there a research body out there somewhere that will tell us if the community feels they're well served by them, if the councillor feels they're helpful, if the mayor feels they're helpful, so that we can sort of start to build what's a best practice if we're going in this direction?
All my research is anecdotal, because I think some of these things you can't capture in data, the degree to which people feel included or heard.
Yeah.
So the academic approach doesn't always work if you're trying to find numbers.
Yeah.
So my book's coming out in May, where I have lots of anecdotal stories from LA, from Edmonton, from Montreal.
But they're real person to person. You've gone into.
And I went to, so the one I really liked, to be honest, was the Borough Council meetings in Montreal. So I went to the Plateau Borough Council meeting, and Montreal's an enormous city, just like Toronto, but I felt like I was in a village. It was an evening meeting. It was casual. There was a lot of chatter and laughter. The council was facing the residents instead of just facing each other. Citizens were able to ask questions, not just responding to things on the agenda, but there's a question period. Not like in
Gallery
Ottawa, where they
behind
just
you
yell at
is
each other.
listening now.
There's a period where any citizen can come up and say, I have an idea, and the council has to respond. And they responded very respectfully. It kind of felt like this, but it was a council meeting. So it essentially created these, it returned some degree of the local democracy that would have been eroded had they taken Toronto's approach. Whereas when we amalgamated, we just said, okay, well, we're just going to shut everything down.
So you went there and actually witnessed it.
Yeah.
We're
I went to
terrible.
LA too, and Edmonton.
We're absolutely terrible at, we're probably going to ask staff to come up with proposals, but just as Bellamy pointed out years ago, and it hasn't changed, we're terrible about sending the professional staff that we want to come up with proposals for us to witness things.
Right.
Should we make sure that whoever is writing this report witnesses what you've witnessed?
Yeah, and I'd also encourage you not to assume that any of those cities have figured it out. I think we need to do a made in Toronto solution, and it's probably would be, I would recommend a combination of really supporting existing residents groups, volunteer-led, citizen-led residents associations that are inclusive, that aren't just a few homeowners fighting a condo, but really engaged groups. And we have lots of great examples all across Toronto, but they're scattered.
Yes.
And so, for example, in Edmonton, there's an Edmonton Federation of Community Leagues. So everyone belongs to a community league, and they have an annual awards night where they get together and celebrate what all the different residents groups are doing. There's no process right now for that to happen in Toronto. So supporting existing residents groups would be great. And then also looking at maybe having some kind of borough council model, which would be so good for folks in Etobicoke, Scarborough, and North York, and East York and York, who got majorly screwed over in '97. We don't have to de-amalgamate to give them back a voice. Just create a lower tier that returns local autonomy for local issues to the areas where the people most impacted can communicate and interact with a local body. The community councils, I don't think, are serving that role right now.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Dave, hang on. I get to ask one. So I wanted to get some more understanding of your research. So you didn't profess the idea that a lower tier would be elected. They would be appointed in some manner. Did your research uncover an appointments process, or how does it work? What's the mechanism?
The best example of an appointed process would be New York. So the community planning boards, which is that lower tier that gave you, that was the 59 community boards here.
Yep.
Which gives you this ratio of bodies per residence up here, which you can see is even better than our community councils. So they elect a borough president, and the president appoints the community boards. I don't think it's a great model, but if you wanted to explore that would be the one to look at. Montreal does the opposite. They actually have full elections for every borough council.
How do these cities deal with ensuring there's integrity and, in fact, public perception of integrity in the system? Because if you've got appointed individuals, it would be a different perception of integrity than you would with elected officials.
So, I mean, this is a bit of going out in left field here. I prefer elected versus appointed, but my preference is neither. There's a lot of experimentation now of random selection of citizens. Toronto has even experimented with it, and the idea is that you can create bodies of people that are randomly selected through various processes, and you end up with really rich deliberative dialogue that doesn't require anyone being appointed or elected. And there's a company called Mass LBP that does this in Toronto, and there's a wealth of knowledge on this. And Canada is actually one of the pioneering countries in the world on this. So my dream would be randomly selected borough councils, but that's probably not on the table right now. But if you had to choose between appointed and elected, I would choose elected.
Thank
For
you.
the reasons you suggested, accountability.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Max Allen from the Grange Community Association, Inc. Welcome, Max.
Good morning.
You have 5 minutes.
As you've noticed, I'm Max Allen. I'm from the Grange, which is an incorporated community association just west of City Hall, represented by Councillors Cressy and Layton. We act on matters that are both local and citywide as they affect us locally. We're glad to think about and participate in new governance experiments at little or no cost to the city. Many of us have the experience to do this, but like councillors, we could use a bit of help, and I'm going to describe one of the ways that the city could help. We have a modest proposal about this, a small, doable idea about citizen participation, not a big, high-level policy idea that you'll hear a lot about. It's less an issue of councillors being overloaded with work, which is one of the issues that we heard about during the campaigns. And opinions differ on that, about whether individual councillors, when they have more constituents, are able to manage their work. And it's more a question, I think, of the quality of your decisions that are made under the new number of councillors. And that, in turn, depends on the quality of the information and the types of alternatives that are available to you. And thus, our suggestion, which goes like this. First, let me tell you some of the things that we are doing at the moment without the kind of help that I'm asking for. We have managed the Grange Park project, which is a sensational popular success. It was a decade-long effort that we're very proud of. For nearly 2 years, 5 of our associations, including our own, have been helping the University of Toronto think about their campus secondary plan. We worked sometimes with the city and sometimes by ourselves to improve the design and function of a mixed-use proposal at 170 Spadina, just north of Queen. We always encourage public realm joint ventures among individual developers. At the moment, we're working with Dream and Tribute on Dundas, west of University. The list goes on, and I've given you a list in the material that we've filed. Associations like ours are both a source of data and a source of practical ideas. Those practical ideas include ways that we've learned to navigate the provincial appeals process at the tribunal. Associations are a reservoir of invaluable local knowledge that's otherwise not easily available to council. As council learns to navigate the 25 wards, associations are also learning to navigate the new city hall structures and appeal processes. In other words, like you, we're busy. But here's something else that we both, by we, I mean councillors and associations, what we both need. In a word, we need a secretariat. It seems likely that councillors may collectively need new resources in addition to their expanded individual staffs. Everybody is getting more staff, but collectively it seems to me there's a place for a body within City Hall to help everybody. One possibility is the creation of one or more research and navigation secretariats like the ones that the BIAs currently have within City Hall, and which we argue, the Residents Association and the councillors need as well. The secretariats might be modeled on the Congressional Research Service in Washington, the in-house research office and think tank that's associated with the U.S. legislative branch. The Congressional Research Service provides policy and legal analysis to committees and members of both the House and the Senate on a nonpartisan basis. The Parliamentary Library in Ottawa works in a similar way.
Thank you, Max.
Such a body in Toronto might be very useful for you and for the associations.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the visiting councillors? Councillor Perks.
Thanks, Max. With the exception of Councillor Bailao, most of my colleagues won't know you here. Max shows up at Community Council every month because there's a lot of development traffic in the area he represents. How do you find the experience of coming to Community Council and trying to be heard? What could we do better? Feel free.
You could ask this question of how do you find the experience to be a counselor, too. The experience is contagious. I'm often asked by people who want to start a residents association, how do you do it? And I go and talk to them and tell them what we've done, and you go to a lot of meetings. Most of my civilian friends don't know anything about how this system works. Look at how few people are here. You know, I was astounded to walk in this morning and discover only this many people here. The two previous speakers have talked about ways to increase citizen participation, and I think that's really important. On an individual basis, we help each other. On a citywide basis, maybe in addition to the secretariat I'm suggesting, which would work on behalf of experienced people, you need an education team to say, the website, the city website is pretty good if you know what you're looking for, and 311 is pretty good if you know what you want, but if you don't, communication.
Max, if you did submit something in writing, I apologize. We're getting a lot of paper suddenly put in front of us. Did you put any of the stuff about the Secretariat in writing?
Yes.
Okay,
there's two documents. One of them is full of footnotes about where there are links to read about this kind of thing, and the other one is just approximately what I've said.
Okay, thank you. Thank
you, Councillor Perks. Councillor Carroll.
Yes, you're here and you were shocked to see how few people, but I'm guessing that you have the time. You represent though an area that is just chock-a-block with young people. With 3 items on the agenda, could we have had this meeting at 6 o'clock in the evening?
I would recommend it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Max.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Adam Smith. Welcome, Adam. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Hello to the committee, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Adam Smith, and I was a councillor candidate for Ward 37. I mean 19. No, 37. Okay, we landed on 19. While I joke now, it sure wasn't a joke when I was trying to plan a strategy for running on a constantly shifting playing field. I was so thrown for a loop when it first happened, I lost a whole weekend of work on my campaign website with my designer because I was truly lost for direction. However, in the end, it inspired me to include in my platform a section on an independent Toronto and direct democracy for Toronto. Whether it be Ford's meddling in our election, or Wynne denying us road tolls, Harris's imposition of amalgamation, or even the knock-on effects of Ray Days, provincial interference in Toronto's functioning has hampered us in various ways for decades. We don't necessarily need to be our own province. Let them handle education and healthcare and the judiciary, but let Toronto be in charge of its day-to-day. Toronto has an army of professional expert staff working hard to ensure our city runs as smoothly and equitably as possible within our monetary limitations. We are the 5th largest government in all of Canada. We have a population greater than many provinces and territories, and we are the economic and financial centre of the nation, not to mention the tax revenue cash cow, both federally and provincially. Toronto doesn't need the Ontario government's oversight so much as Ontario needs Toronto's tax revenues. The City of Toronto Act gives us some powers no other city has, but we still need to go begging to the province to change many of our own rules or institute new policies, all while our backlog of approved but unfunded capital projects piles up. And more than a few times in the last 30 years, the policies Toronto needs have not lined up with the ideology or need for votes of the Premier's office. We're currently witnessing the uncertainty caused by the potential subway upload. These erratic, destabilizing, and very personal policies of specious efficacy by our economically illiterate Premier is precisely why Ontario had its credit rating downgraded. Thankfully, Toronto's remains intact, second from the top year after year. We suffered the turmoil and chaos of provincial imposition at its height with Ford's interference right in the middle of our election. In what universe is it acceptable that the mandateless whim of an ignorant megalomaniac, drunk on the power of his false majority, allows him with total impunity, no consultation, and subverting the democratic decision of elected council to take spiteful revenge on the council that frequently voted against him and the city that rejected him for mayor by throwing a gerrymandering monkey wrench right in the middle of our elections?
Adam, I'm just going to pause
I'm
your time
moving
for
on.
a sec if I can ask you to stick on point with governance.
And how is this blatant assault on democracy even legal? Who would accept the inherent tyranny of such a law? Were council more united on the issue, my suggestion would have been to simply ignore his dictate and continue with the 47 wards. What exactly was he going to do? Send in the OPP, shut down City Hall, institute martial law, take us to court? I ask, if the entire City of Toronto chose to ignore him, what could he really do? Because in the end, that's where true power really lies, with the people. And it is only our cooperation with the halls of power that allow them to call the shots. They do so at our pleasure, which is also why I fully agree with the Mayor that the future of Toronto's governance should have been a choice of the people being governed. All governance issues in Toronto should be put to referendum. Want to change the size of council? Referendum. Council wants a raise? Referendum. Using ranked ballots? Referendum. A municipal party system? Referendum. Term limits? Referendum. A brief word on term limits. They are inherently undemocratic because they arbitrarily limit democratic choice. There is no way to empirically determine the proper number of terms, and if voters love their councillor and want to keep voting them in, that is their democratic choice, not council's. Most damaging to residents, however, is the loss of service and access to one's councillor. I know from close contact with my previous councillor that the volume of resident calls and emails per day numbered at least 100, oftentimes more, and that was with a population of around 60,000. I can only imagine how difficult it will be with over 110,000 and how much less time people will get with their councillor. And with such large wards, it also means that party connections and deep pockets will always have an electoral advantage. So call it what you will, a charter city, a recognition in the Constitution, whatever it is, Toronto is more than merely a creature of the province, and it's time our laws reflected that. Otherwise, that 151-year-old proclamation we call a constitution truly becomes an obsolete anachronism. Canada is not the rural emptiness it once was. The vast majority of our population lives in cities, and it's time they get their due. No city should have its democratic rights violated by a petty, vengeful, buck-a-beer-shilling demagogue. Lastly, I fully advocate for a city-wide referendum open to all residents of Toronto with ID showing an address in Toronto on returning to the 47-ward model for the next election. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Bradford?
Through the chair, thanks very much for that barn burner, Adam. Obviously, a lot of passion around this topic, and certainly appreciate that. What was the biggest challenge for you, aside from sort of, the cutting of the ward boundaries and the chaos that took place there? But aside from that, what was the biggest challenge in the municipal election for you as a candidate?
I guess I would say is the unfamiliar territory I was then forced to go into. It was the fact that I knew my home ward very well, and I was a stranger to the other half. And after nearly a decade of learning one thing, I was kind of forced to jump on the other. And simply put, it's one thing if that was done prior to the election. It's a completely different story to do it in the middle of the election, It just totally throws everyone off balance, and that was the biggest challenge for me, was simply having to get familiar, within a few months mid-election with a territory that I just wasn't my home.
I think that was everybody.
Yeah.
And there was 241 candidates, I think, that ran for council in the election, and that was kind of everyone's experience. What, aside from it became 25 wards, what other sort of challenges did you experience?
Oh, I mean, like, I suppose at that point, I don't know, are we really just talking about the usual challenges of any candidate, Again, if you throw aside the uncertainty and the chopping of the wards, I guess it was just, the typical getting out there. How do you hit enough houses? I mean, you were a shining example of how you really, hit the ground and nail tens of thousands of homes. But, the biggest challenge, I think, I guess that's it too, is that it's hard enough to get around to, 60,000 residents. It's even hard to get around to 110, like there's only so many hours in the day and so many volunteers you can get behind you.
So based on your experience, it sounds like you would maybe suggest that cutting council or having 25 wards will make it inherently more difficult for new candidates.
Yes.
Having to go to 110,000 residents,
Yes.
having to fundraise.
It'll be much harder for a truly grassroots candidate to ever get a foothold. Again, deep pockets. It takes money to run a campaign, especially with a large, again, a campaign essentially on the same size as an MP or an MPP now, because we've got the same size ridings. And without party connections or deep pockets, it becomes very difficult to get entry into that arena.
Thank you. Last question. What sort of work would you suggest for specific things? Are there any specific things you would suggest direct this committee to look at over the term here?
Well, as I said, I think referendums are important. I think, we need to find ways, citizen assembly is one thing, but I really think it needs to go to, decisions like this. Any governance decision, I think, should go to the wider public, straight up, hands down. Again, I don't know what the cost of that is. I can tell you there are places in Ontario already doing online voting for municipal elections. I only know of Smiths Falls, of all the random places I can mention, but, even the federal government, through its e-petitions, has found a stable and secure way to gather public input. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be a costly exercise, referendums, and it could be something that can be done from people's homes if, the city would manage to figure out a way to do that online.
Thanks very much. Appreciate you coming down.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
I'm just wondering, you're a fan of referenda, we get that. But I'm wondering if you want to speak to how we get around, if we broaden it out. And I'm a fan of participatory decision-making, obviously. But a full-on referenda type of structure leaves you vulnerable to, David Frum did a great speech on this on CNN, that in the era of social media, it becomes very problematic because of the way social media can so easily manipulate and create an angry mob, one way or the other. And since a referenda agenda for a government leads to more and more decisions being taken that way, are we leaving ourselves more and more open to I hate to use the term fake news or anything else that might manipulate the outcome of each individual referendum?
Well, what I would ask you is, how is that any different from any of our elections right now? What you just said is applicable to any of our elections, any of our, our wider elections, whether it be the city, the province, or the Fed. So to me, that's a problem with any time you're going to a vote with the people. They're going to be subject and exposed to fake news. They're going to be subject and exposed to ideologues and demagogues wanting to drive them in, some illogical direction that suits their purposes. It really, though, in the end, and this is how I felt, about when Ontario put MMP on the ballot as well. It is incumbent on the government to educate its people and to dispel the fake news and to ensure that the information is getting out there in a timely fashion and in a way that is accessible to residents.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? None. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Mary T. Hines.
I've got a three-dimensional deputation.
Welcome, Mary. You've got 5 minutes with us.
Oh, good, you can see all this. Okay, this is our city.
Can I just get you to at least bend the microphone a little bit towards your... Yep, there you go. Make sure we can hear you.
That work?
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, so,
I believe it.
yes, but I know you have to record it as well. So let's just assume we have only 6 wards in the city for a minute, just to make life easier. I know this is using my time, but this is important. So we have, in this particular case, 4 different interests being expressed. Now, what I want to explain is that you now have twice as many residents to deal with, and you still have to deal with all the different committees that are out there. Let's see if I got everybody moved in the right place. So, oh, here we go. Okay, so, this is a ward, this is a ward, this is a ward, this is a ward, etc. Within each ward, you have different interests. So, for instance, let's just say these people are your seniors forum people. Right now, you could have people coming from anywhere within the city. But let's for a minute suppose you have 25 wards and you have 25 representatives on the seniors forum, and you have 25 representatives on the youth council, and you have 25 representatives, say, on a food security council. But within each ward, these people can come together on a ward basis. So you would have a ward council made up of the different interests. And then the representatives that stand for a different interest would come together, probably at City Hall, and deal with their interest. So that you would have a two-way stream. And I think this could be done fairly easily, fairly quickly, with minimal cost, because you're looking at citizens rather than paid staff. You would have not necessarily the councilor having to come to each meeting, but their staff person that they would designate. So they would have someone from their staff who comes to their community council meeting and deals with things. Perhaps the councilor would come some of the time, but they wouldn't have to come to each meeting. And then these people would come together, say at City Hall or some other location within the city, and in that case, they would then be discussing their interests, their specific interests. I think it's time for it. I think it's something that could be done quite easily. I've seen some other good ideas come up today, but I think this is something that could also be done quite easily now. I welcome your questions.
Thank you. Any questions from visiting councilors? None? Councillor Carroll?
So we have a seniors forum now, we have a youth forum now, and they've both been really fairly sustainable. They have endured whatever ups and downs we go through here since being formed. But we don't put them together. We don't provide any opportunity. You're a seniors forum member, for instance.
Have been.
You have been in the
now,
past.
because
Yeah.
it actually was quite dysfunctional.
So that's
in
where,
my opinion.
That's where I was going. We tend to say, stay over there, youth, stay over there, seniors. We never put you together in a room so that there's that opportunity to grow for each of the groups. So you're suggesting build on those groups, but have them function on a ward basis together from time to time. That's all you're saying. Build on things that we have already got some framework for.
Or you might come up with new groups. For instance, you used to have a pedestrian committee, which died in 2010. Perhaps that's a new committee you might want to add. Mm-hmm. So it's up to the council, I think, to decide exactly which committees. I don't think it's up to me to tell you what committees would be best, although I have my own ideas. But
in each case, if we had them occasionally ward gather.
Exactly,
And
because there's ward-wide issues that you need to deal with, because things, for instance, let's say a bicycle network. Well, the issues in North York are going to be different than the issues in downtown Toronto. Mm-hmm. And so they might come together to discuss bicycle issues at one point, but at another point, they might have to work with other people in their ward as to where bicycling fits in their ward.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. It's very interesting.
Any other questions? I did have two, Mary.
Sure.
Thank you. Do you have any advice for us regarding how council would establish the numbers of committees? So, essentially, how many of the dice, how many of the tiles that you had on your example. Is there a critical number of them? Is it 5? Is it 50? Is it 100? Any vision with
I would
respect to
think
that?
that you'd probably be looking to start with maybe 10 at most, because you want them to be able to function, and you don't want to have, you know, one for cars and one for buses and one for, you know, you want to sort of make it workable. And I know there's certain issues that come up again and again. I mean, housing is important, food security is important, cycling seems to be very important, pedestrian issues, and especially around pedestrian safety, is very important, seniors issues, youth issues. So those are certainly areas where you'd want to, I think 50 would be unwieldy. You can, a committee of 50 doesn't get to do all its work.
Do you propose this structure in addition to the existing structure that we've got, or would you see this more replacing council subcommittees and other groups that we've got right now?
I don't think it would replace council subcommittees, because that's where the councilors actually have their voice, if that's what you mean, the, like this committee and the other 4 committees. So I think that's very important to have councilors be the voice for each of those areas. But I can see replacing the current, obviously, Seniors Forum or the current Youth Cabinet.
Okay,
And adding, because some of these groups now are just advocacy groups, like there's bicycling networks that come together as advocacy groups. But I think there should be a representation within each ward of cyclists.
okay, and then so a ward-based model would create 25 committee members. Is your emphasis more on geographic distribution or increasing the quantum of the numbers of members?
Well, I think because you have 25 wards and you have 25 councillors who are responsible for their ward, that this fits well together, as opposed to some other lines that would then cross some other way. And 25 is a workable number. So you've been given lemons, let's make use of it.
Could you ever see a purpose of a committee that would be, say, 4 or 5, such as a regional one that would represent a community council area?
I think it's not as functional. Well, look at the problems you had trying to divide up the city into the four councils that you have. And then I'm not sure that York and East York are very happy. So I think that that's not the best way to do things. This is a model I've actually used as a teacher in teaching things, because what I've done is had students, for instance, in one case, they were learning about different cultures. And so they were in groups for each culture. But then there would be an expert in each group who was dealing, for instance, with the clothing for that culture. And they came together to talk about clothing issues, but then they went back to their group and talked about their culture. So it's called a jigsaw model, and it's been used in teaching.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's something that's adaptable to something like this.
Thank you for joining us. No other questions. Our next speaker is Kyle Iannuzzi. Is Kyle here? Okay, our next speaker then will be Rowan Keister. Keister? Good morning, Rowan.
Morning.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm hoping this will just be easy and problem-free. HDMI. Okay.
Okay. You all set, Rowan?
I have this really great graphic, like one of the stool graphics. Three-legged stool graphics. So I think I can just talk my way through it.
We'll work with you. Welcome, you've got 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to the committee. This is a bit of short notice, so I've tried to put together some information as quickly as I could. The first slide is titled Uncharted Waters, so you'll just have to use your imagination for this. The context is really unusual. It's unprecedented in Canada for there have been a change to the makeup of a city council during an election period. The size and the number of wards was both tabled and given royal assent during the election period. We've learned a few things, though, along the way. We've relearned that municipal governance is a matter of provincial policy and does not require consultation. We've learned that the timing of legislation, according to the Attorney General, is at the discretion of the province. And we've learned that really we've learned that this will set a precedent in that there's no telling what the next provincial government will want to do or feel capable of doing, given the way the last election ran. Governance, I just want to point out, in terms of the request for suggestions today, modernizing governance has happened many, many, many times. We had Alderman Council back in 1834. We had a Board of Control. We had Council put a plebiscite to the citizens in 1933, asking if everyone would agree to reduce the number of councillors by a third. So in 1934, we went from 3 councillors per ward down to 2 councillors per ward. We had Metro Toronto, we had the Board of Control abolished, amalgamation parts 1 and 2, City of Toronto Act, and so forth. This is where I had that amazing slide, which you don't need. But basically saying that my expectations for this government's conversation is that any new structure will be legitimate, effective, and accountable. Legitimate, it'll be responsible government. Effective, it'll be an appropriate model given what we're facing in Toronto right now. And accountable, it'll remain as accountable, at least as accountable as it has been in the past, which means rules and regulation to preclude patronage and corruption. I have 3 recommendations. I was really heartened to see in the emails sent to this committee a couple of great reports. I think there's many more of them out there. I don't have 25 recommendations, I have 3. The first one is to fully fund all accountability offices. The second is to prioritize the open data governance. And the third is to establish an arm's length expert commission on governance, on the subject that we're starting to look at now. And the reason for the accountability office's recommendation and the open data recommendation is that this discussion of governance can't happen without ensuring that the process is legitimate. In other words, what you come up with will have an effective public consultation, and it can't happen without an informed electorate. And it needs to be accountable as well. We have to make sure that any decisions that happen as a part of this governance discussion don't impact our ability to hold ourselves on council and in staff to account. So just to give each of those recommendations a bit more of a description, fully funding all accountability offices is important because we know that during transitions between structures, there's always an opportunity for something to happen. Currently, we have charges against councillors Grimes and DiCiano. There was a Create TO job posting recently that included a recommendation that they might have experience from the mayor's office. And then we don't know if Sidewalk Toronto and if all of the conversations between Sidewalk Toronto and city staff and councillors have really been captured by the lobbyist registry. In terms of open data governance, we want to make sure that Information is available to residents throughout this process that will let them make an informed decision. Just as an example, starting next month, of course, we'll be able to look at the election spending for 2018, looking at the information for 2014. We know that we can make observations about the ability of citizens to run for election.
Ronan, can I get you to wrap up? You can have a couple of seconds because you had some trouble at the start, but we're over the 5 minutes.
That was eating into my time, sorry. Okay, really briefly then. Having election information made available, for example, through the open data policy would let us make observations about the way this city is built through elections. For example, 30,000, for example, during the 2014 election, there were 30,000 votes belonging to candidates or given to candidates who did not file financial disclosures. So
Thank you, Rowan.
30,000 is effectively one word.
Are there any questions from outside members of council? None. Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, so on your final point, that's a concern. 30,000 votes went to people, and probably those voters don't even know the people they backed didn't disclose their financial returns in the end. There are jurisdictions in New York City. You file financial returns pre-election day. By the time people are voting, they can look back over election year and see that you have been audited and whether or not you complied throughout the election year as part of the grant financing program. Do you think that this committee needs to look at, if we're going to look at such reforms as term limits, we should be looking at election finance reform as well?
I think so. One point to make is that there's 90 days after the election to dispute the results of the election, but the filing deadline is much longer than that. So it creates an opportunity for results not to be able to be disputed because of that difference in time limits, because the difference of the 30 days. With regards to election financing and term limits, one thing to point out is that in the court case before the Court of Appeal right now, the Attorney General argued that because councillors themselves decided on the 47 ward option, it is less legitimate than if they had hired outside help. So in other words, if councillors themselves are making decisions on election financing reform, if they're making decisions on term limits, and they're not seeking help from an outside body, it is a less legitimate process.
Right. So talk about misinformation in the news, that was a shock to us when that was written, because there was in fact lots of outside help to arrive at the map of 47, and yet it wasn't known even as should be well-informed room as a court. So if we did look at election finance reform, we really ought to bring in an objective third party to help us arrive at a model.
I think, and that was my third recommendation, an objective third party is not only required just through history. I mean, if you go back to the beginning of Metro Toronto, there was a report, the Cumming report, that gave the government the legitimacy it needed to institute Metro Toronto. However, there were conversations at that time between Cumming and the provincial government.
Right.
We can't necessarily assume that any change in governance decided by this committee will withstand a legal challenge if there's no independence of that committee from incumbent council. Because the Attorney General argued that the incumbents have an inherent interest in the results of their committees. So incumbents shouldn't be deciding rules for themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Are there any other questions? I have one. You'd raised the issue of election finances, and it had been discussed in the question here. Do you have any advice for this committee on what that is in the city's control with respect to election finances? Because we know a lot of it is regulatory based on provincial legislation. Is there something that the city has direct control over that you recommend that we take a look at?
I would be asking the candidates themselves. They would have more information on barriers to entry. I think oftentimes there are barriers that candidates face that are actually not covered by legislation, just in terms of making themselves known that they are candidates. I would be speaking to candidates.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Miguel Avila Velarde. Welcome, Miguel. Are you going to plug in?
No, I don't need to plug anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You got 5 minutes.
Yes. When I started coming to City Hall was in 2009 after being fired from the Toronto Zoo, because I wanted to create a citizen advisory committee to provide a second sober opinion to the Toronto Zoo Board. Because of my political opinion, basically I was terminated from my job. I came to this city council when budget chief was Shelley Carroll. And from then on, I realized that the city has a real problem. What is the problem that the city has? It's courage. Courage to ask the questions that are important at budget time. We don't have, we can have 50 councillors, 25 councillors, 44, 47, whatever the number you want to call it. We don't have the courage to ask the tough questions that need to be asked. I'm going to give you one good example. The Toronto Police Services Board. Did you know that there is a conflict of interest in that particular board? It's not very democratic. We have been spoken many times, many issues. Basically, we don't have received answers to questions when we ask the members of that board. We feel the absence of Shelley Carroll. I mean, she was able to ask the tough questions to the board. But currently, this board composition does not answer the questions that matter to us, such as police culture. Nobody has the guts to ask the questions, what are we going to do to change the police culture at the Toronto Police Services? We all talk about elimination of guns, poverty reduction, et cetera, but we're not doing what we should be doing 10 years ago, is to reform our police services. So I have a recommendation to make to this committee, is to dissolve the Police Services Board and let another group of people become part of that group to bring forward ideas and solutions that address the concerns of the Black and brown communities in this city of Toronto, because we have been severely affected by cutting and racial profiling. Now, the province is changing Bill 147. There's supposed to be a change to the Police Act and the way they deal with SIU and other governing bodies to keep accountable, at least, our police services. The CTV News reported the other night that almost every year, 20 police officers stay at home collecting cash by not doing anything because their cases are being heard in court. Why we had to tolerate such a tradition over and over and over? The money is about $1.5 million that should be instead given to them for those officers for staying at home. We should be given to the poor people in this community that are facing crisis of homelessness. We don't have a real affordable housing project. And I want to ask Councilor Bailao to stop it, call it affordable housing, because it's not affordable for a mother of 3 children on Ontario Works to apply for it. Please, if you can prove me today that a single mother, can apply for those new Housing Action Now projects that you have in mind, please, I will give you the credit to you. Unless you prove it to me, I will not believe that we have affordable housing. Secondly, I want to ask to review or to change the Civic Appointments Committee. I have offense that Denson Minion Wong is the chair of that committee selection process because he would not allow me or my friend over here, Derek Moran, or anybody who has a progressive ideas to change our city. Because if you don't have the cojones to ask the tough questions, let us do it. We can't ask the tough question because we don't have a party to respond to. We are the grassroots movement. We are the ones who speak the questions that need and speak the truth about our situation in this city. We have a crisis of homelessness, but instead we want to approach it in a way that we have an affordable housing, but it's not affordable, you know? And again, stop the Police Services Board. They're continuously harassing us. They have harassed Desmond Cole, they have harassed Dion, Rene, and every single activist who has come to that board have been severely harassed.
Thank you, Miguel.
In order to... Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Ask me the tough questions, please. Groson cojones.
Councilor Carroll.
I do have one.
We all do respect.
I do have one, Miguel. I want to go back to your first point. You were trying to develop an advisory board to the school board.
To the Toronto Zoo.
Right. Well, it's not unlike what we've heard from some of the deputies this morning, that there needs to be some advisory board to, we're such a small council now, each of us representing so many, that there needs to be some local advisory board informing us. Have you looked at that? Would that solve the problem that we have in some of those arm's length agencies, if there was at least community bringing concerns about those agencies to council on a regular basis?
Absolutely. We need to reinforce our voices. Our democracy has been diminished. We are 20. You are now 25.
Yeah.
You need us on board. Embrace us. Love us. You hear us coming here for 10 years. Take that advice so we can make this city much better instead of being derailed and destroyed by someone at Queen's Park right now. We have to move forward with courage in order that we get things done for our citizens, for our children, for our seniors, for everybody here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Next on the list is Susan Dexter from the Harvard Village Residents Association.
Good morning to you all.
Welcome, Susan. You have 5 minutes.
I have a great cold, but I'm not infectious. Yeah, I'm Sue Dexter, member of the board of Harvard Village Residents Association. Our boundaries are Bloor, College, Bathurst, and Spadina. You don't need us to tell you something major happened to the city when council was downsized 6 months ago. We're here to tell you the impacts were not yours alone. For the last 6 months, many of our associations and concerned individuals have been grappling with how to ensure effective representation not be sacrificed. As a measure of interest, 24 hours ago, we circulated our proposal to a few close residents association, and through the day yesterday, got requests to sign on to our presentation from the Annex, Parkdale, Ossington, Roncesvalles, Macdonell, and from a member of West Killeen West. There was an observation made that there are very few people here today. I think that's an artifact of no publicity. There's been no groundwork made. You should involve us right off the top. Background. This is not the first major change imposed on this city by the province. The last overhaul of basic structures came in the wake of amalgamation in 1998-2004 period. Staff then had the luxury of 2 years' notice to determine how the governments and services they delivered could be combined. Once amalgamation came into effect, a special committee of council, similar to this, examined the staff proposals and recommended some change. Community councils, as an example, was an idea that flowed from that initiative. While amalgamation dealt for the most part with combining local governments, reduction in the size of council today impacts basic democratic structures. This is a serious business for all of us. Our concern is that there be the most robust engagement of the public in adapting our model of governance to the reduced council. This should be a true collaboration, a partnership. The government we will reimagine belongs to both of us, and thankfully we have experience and systems to bring that about. We're no strangers to public consultation. In the past half-dozen years, TO Core had a model process. Initial ideas were dramatically changed through collaboration of staff, experts, stakeholders, special interests, and the community. We also know how to attack complicated problems through a committee such as this. In the last term of council, there was broad citizen and expert participation in the Forestry, Parks and Recreation Subcommittee on climate change mitigation and plans. The first meeting had 54 deputants and 99 written comments. I dare say there was some advertisement ahead of that meeting. That committee spent time designing terms of reference and a work plan. It ultimately included roundtables, public consultations, evening sessions with input from staff and experts. It is an appropriate model for this committee because that issue, too, spanned a number of different city departments and impacted every single resident of the city. A change in governance of this magnitude is rarely encountered. We believe if you get the process right, the results could be transformative for the better. We've included a scattergun of ideas in our proposal, which we've communicated with you, but believe our best contribution is in our detailed principal recommendation on process, which we urge you to read. In outline, our first advice is take your time to get the work plan right. Design it to involve the public early and frequently, ensure meetings are well publicized, and take place at night or on a weekend to ensure maximum participation. This should be a public conversation. Give it time to shift and change. Listen to the public. They are as much impacted by the reduction in council as councillors themselves. Make sure we are fully consulted if changes are contemplated. We need to build democracy, not diminish it. It's been 20 years since we looked at governance. Let's do it properly. We'd be letting down our great city if we tossed off what first comes to mind. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions from the committee? Susan, may I ask one
Sure.
question, please? It has come up a couple of times just about the awareness of this committee meeting. Do you have any suggestions, either for this specific committee or even just committees in general, about notice period or process to notify people?
Well, I think what you need is buzz. So I think you guys should carry the message forth because you've got access to the media, certainly talking about how exciting the process is, what you have in mind, you know, the range of possibilities. You can invoke the neighborhood associations for sure, community organizations, and social media. Go for it, because I think it's unhelpful in the end if you get the ideas of 25 people when you could get 2,500 people, because you'll get better stuff out of big meetings with focus groups and the rest of it. Talk to planning. Planning's got the recipe down perfectly, and I think you may need to do some visuals. You need prep time, and that's why I'm talking about your work plan. Get staff going on it. You know how to do it. And you talk about it, and don't talk glumly. You know, years ago I met one of the EAs wandering around Queen's Park. There's some demonstration, and it was about 2 years after maybe after even the committee had reported. And I said, how are things? And he said, oh, it's triage, it's terrible, you know. And everybody go down in the ditch and look glum doesn't help. Let's make this a great city. That's your challenge. And I think you've opened it up. And we're really, I mean, we've got some really good councillors on this committee. So go for it. You can change things. You can make things better. This isn't the end of the universe. And I said, you know, get with it. Get with it. Don't. Because you're doing great work. You can do magnificent work if you choose to.
Thank you. Next speaker is Joy Connelly. It's Joy here. Good morning, Joy.
Magnificent work. I think that's what I want to talk about too.
Welcome. You've got 5 minutes.
So thank you. And thank you to the chair for creating this opportunity for us to talk about good governance under a 26-member council. Really, to talk about how City Council can best meet the challenges facing this city. And I'm smiling at Councillor Bilal because you know I'm going to talk about housing. Last summer, Mayor Tory called for a standing committee on housing, saying, the importance of this issue cannot be understated. A standing housing committee will give this issue the attention and cross-divisional planning it deserves. But now that Toronto has a smaller council, I know some may feel that devoting an entire standing committee to housing is a luxury we can't afford. But if you had a chance to read the excellent market analysis commissioned by the Affordable Housing Office, main message, things are at breaking point now, and then add 1 million more people in 12 years, you might think maybe that assumption deserves a second look. So let's think about what we need to meet the challenges outlined in the marketing analysis. We need the obvious. We need shelter support and housing and the Affordable Housing Office to work together as a team under a single council committee, because we won't solve homelessness until we bring together homeless services with permanent solutions, the affordable housing we have now and the affordable housing we hope to create. But there are other divisions that also need to be involved. For sheer number of units, the good work that MLS did with Airbnb regulation could turn out to be one of Council's signature housing supply strategies. The senior strategy developed by SDFA, essential. Consider the untapped potential of our city planning division to make and keep housing affordable. Dwelling room protections for some of Toronto's most affordable housing, inclusionary zoning, zoning to allow seniors to downsize without leaving their home communities, fast-tracking planning approvals at a time when construction costs are increasing at 1% per month. And think how silos are hobbling city staff. Right this minute, city planning is developing protections for dwelling rooms, but they don't work, those rules, for most of rooms at risk. But when I and my colleagues were coming with suggestions, the lovely planner smiled ruefully and said, we're planning. We can only use planning tools. And consider the problem when city divisions work at cross purposes. Shelter support and housing is building shelters as fast as it can. Meanwhile, MLS is closing rooming houses, the only affordable alternative for people leaving homelessness. I'm not telling these anecdotes to criticize city staff. They are fulfilling the mandates given to their divisions. But we need to align these mandates, and that direction comes from the city's governance structure. So, shelter support and housing and affordable housing office under one committee. Strong connections with planning, Create-TO, MLS, SDFA, every division that shapes the homes we live in. Seems to be a rather meaty agenda for any committee. So good luck with your deliberations, and thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you for joining us. Our next speaker is Victor Willis from the Parkdale Activity Recreation Center. Morning, Victor. Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I sent in a deputation sort of this morning, so I don't know if it's printed. I hope you will get it. I will try to But of course, really what I want to do is echo the previous speaker, Joy, because housing. And I think that I want to give a bit of an opportunity to say, so I was born in the city at the Wellesley Hospital. I've worked and lived here most of my adult life. I've got a family member who is homeless. I run a small charitable not-for-profit that in Parkdale that attempts to provide supports for people with mental health issues. And I've built supportive housing, I've opened supportive housing, and I've seen the effect of it. So I want to sort of provide both a, kind of an individual Torontonian's perspective, one that's not dissimilar from, I think, many Torontonians, because we have numerous hats and intersections with this issue. And the issue, I think we know, is actually kind of catastrophic, because we've got, I think that the other part about it is to be here today to listen to amazing people give you fabulous ideas about this very important topic. You're at the point of you're building something. Let's say you're going to build a structure, and so you're hearing from potential architects to give you the design to create an opportunity to solve a problem, and the problem is access to affordable and supportive housing, and it's to also provide a doorway off the street and into homes, and then for other parts of our city for people to find a place to live and to succeed in their lives. That's the deal. How do you do that in an extremely small council with huge issues? So as Joy talked about, I think that what's really important about the opportunity you have is to not walk away from the idea of a standing committee. And so, Councillor Bailao, I can't reinforce enough that, yes, there are many issues. Some fabulous stuff about transportation being both cars and public transportation and bicycles. I rode my bike here today. Yes, you need to, in fact, have comprehensive and connected solutions. But if we think about housing, and as I came here today, I passed numerous cranes and developments. Over the last 25 years, is it 250,000 units that we've developed? Maybe more. Some great work that you've done and others have identified, of course, that 96,000 of those units are in fact not occupied by owners. We also know that 1/3 of those units, in fact, are resold without anybody even in them. So we're building an enormous amount of housing, it seems, but in fact we're not solving the most fundamental issues that we have, which is how do we get people who need access to homes, how do we get them in a home? And so I think Joy's done a fabulous job of identifying the various parts of the connections that you need to have in order to assist you with your deliberations. And of course, I think the other part of where these connections need to be made really clear is the last street needs assessment identified 8,500 people who are homeless. The one previous to that was about 6,500, and the one previous to that was about 4,500. So any measure of our governors to help solve a problem, that measure is actually getting worse. And it's because you don't have the tools to look at this holistically and across all of the divisions that you need to do. I'm just from a small, I live at St. Clair and Bathurst, and I work in Parkdale. And one of the interesting things about some of the issues that we see in Parkdale and the solutions that we propose have been actually suggested by others here this morning. It's about an engaged community. It's about a link between that community and its decision maker, and we've had a fabulous one in Gord, so we've been very fortunate. But the other part of this is that the solutions that we come up with need to be replicated and they need to be supported. So I really see this as an amazing opportunity. I think that Sue Dexter suggested that there's magnificent work that can be done, but of course, you're really at a moment of real opportunity of getting it right. And so I just want to encourage you and say, please do the right thing. Please build the right structure. please provide a solution to the huge issues we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Victor. Are there questions from outside members of the committee? Seeing none. Councillor Perks, I have you first.
Thank you. Victor, thank you for what you presented. I heard it. I want to ask you about something slightly different.
Sure.
So one of the dilemmas we struggle with when we're trying to design governance systems and systems of transparency and inclusion in the decision-making process is the way it's set up now. Certain kinds of people get included and certain kinds don't. And one thing that I'm well aware of is that it's very difficult under the current system of involving people in decision-making to include people who are marginally housed or have been homeless or live in poverty. We don't tend to hear, as like if you look around the room, right? I'm wondering, I know your organization has done some great things around that. I'm wondering if you have advice as we redesign our government to make sure that it's more inclusive across economic and social strata.
Well, it's funny you should mention that. Actually, at my next, I'm leaving here to go to 5 Good Ideas to talk about people with lived experience being involved at all levels of our organization, which is an inherent sort of motherhood statement of how Park was created. And that means that we have half of our board of directors are people with lived experience. It means that every committee, every decision, and throughout our organization are people who are affected and have a direct and complete understanding of the issues that they experience. As somebody with a mental health history, having been homeless, living in poverty. So what are the opportunities that City Council has? There are other jurisdictions that in fact make sure that certain of groups that in fact are usually excluded, they make a special room. It's, sort of the basic principle of equity is, I'm a middle-class white male who gets paid to come here, and so I can come here. But in fact, who are the ones that don't? And what are the ramps that you create in order to create them to be able to do so? There are lots of examples. I think, in fact, there are probably numerous city reports that have given you how those examples could be activated. What I like is that some of your previous speakers talked about local councils, local opportunities, and then how do we make sure that it's not just the usual suspects, but in fact the people that we really want to be involved in those kinds of decision-making. We do it locally at Park, and we do it locally in Parkdale, where we have about 30 organizations who are working together. We monthly have meetings where they're open for anybody in the neighborhood to come together and talk about the well-being indicators that we think are important for people in Parkdale. It's that kind of a thing that I think that needs to be done, and I think that there's expertise, as so many amazing people here have talked about, within the residents of this city.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thank you so much for your comments. You mentioned already that you're building on all the things you've heard this morning, and you used the word opportunity several times. We seem to be hearing a message, your special governance committee that you may have initially thought was to fix whatever the problems are of having 25 councillors, but you're saying take the opportunity to fix some things that were broken under 44, in fact, and fix it all. So I'm wondering if you'd like to comment on, we have our elections and you say what you say to get elected, and I say what I say. I don't know what others have said. I'm not at their election. But one of the things that we have heard again and again, we heard it from youth in the last term. I'm looking at the U of T report. The Monk School put together a panel, and they're saying it there, some of the city's sort of urban luminaries, that when we start a term, whether it's 25 councillors or 100 councillors, when we start a term, we should have a broad citywide consultation and understand what you think our priorities should be, and build from there in terms of financial planning and everything else. And that we should also switch the budget sequence, that rather than we build towards finally putting it in the executive committee room where the mayor, it becomes his budget, that it actually ought to start there so that it's clear it's his priorities we're using, and those priorities ought to be informed by you. That's something that people have been complaining about even under the model of 44 councillors. When you say use this opportunity, do you mean fix things like that as well?
Well, I guess, yes, I would agree. I think that the opportunity that you have, and I think that this committee, of course, as you set the structures about solving the problems that we need to have solved, but I also want to really be clear that it's aspirational. I mean, this city, in fact, can be quite an amazing city. There are parts of it, and depending on your mobility, usually based on wealth, also based on the color of your skin, sadly, but we know that certain mobility issues and certain access allows people to have a great experience in this city. The real leveling piece that we need to do is to make sure that all residents have a great experience in this city. And there are a couple of examples given. I mean, I think that Montreal does a great job of that, having been there many times, being a real fan of it. And I hear young people talking about moving to Montreal because they can't afford Toronto. We're losing people because we actually haven't thought about at the grassroots. So whether it's participatory democracy as far as budgeting, how you want to grow your grassroots, your citizens, the residents, the people who live in the neighborhoods. I mean, we call it a city of neighborhoods, but we've done everything we can to destroy that ability. And I think that there's so much that's been done back from the days of asset-based community development, et cetera. You can do it. Please do it now, because we're at such a terrible crisis that to not do it now means that we're going to have so many more people dying on the streets and so many more people leaving the city, and that in fact it's going to be a city only for those who have access and power. I urge you to read one article, if you're going to read anything, or at least have somebody read it for you and give you the Coles Notes. Death of a Great American City, Harper's article last July. And in that article, it talked about the fact that condos, all of the development you see, that's not housing. Those are safety deposit boxes for wealth. Yeah. And if you think about it that way, you understand that you are, of course, it's funding some of the things that you need to have funded, but it's not actually a home for anybody. I can't thank you enough for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. I did have a question as well. In your original speaking, you talked about some examples in city reports where it would increase access for an array of citizens. And you talked about mobility as being one of the barriers. Could you give me some tighter examples of that, some concrete ones?
Well, actually, in my submission, I give a bunch of links at the bottom of it. There's been, well, I mean, you've got some experts in the room here with Dave Nesland and others who have provided opportunities for council to look at the other tiers that we need to have in order to have access. Remarkably, Chicago, which of course is in some ways has been partnered with Toronto to look at the similar pieces, very specifically, there's a homeless directorate. There are a group of people who have lived experience of homelessness, and they actually have sort of a council voice, and they're able to talk directly to council about their experience. All around the world, there are numerous pieces, and I know that there are city documents that have done this. I'm happy to send you those links if they're helpful, or to my colleagues that I work with directly.
Start with the ones in the letter, which are helpful, but do you advocate for more decentralized decision-making, or is it more an opportunity or a conduit to wage an opinion or have a voice heard?
So I think that I think that you've heard here a number of things. You've got a smaller council and bigger issues, and so it's about what decisions do you need to spend time on. And obviously, whether I'm going to cut down a tree in my backyard, which is an important thing from one point of view, is that actually how you want to spend your time? There are numerous things that could be you could give the authority to the next tier or some sort of local council piece to address, so that you guys can in fact hold the bigger issues and solve the bigger problems that you have, not just about what's bugging my neighbor, but really what this city needs over the next 5, 10, and 25 years.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Rosemary Dawson. Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. You pronounced my name right. That doesn't happen often. I'm very pleased to be speaking after that last speaker because a lot of what I want to talk about flows into that. So good morning and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak about the crucial matters of governance in the City of Toronto. I'm not a member of a residents association, a ratepayers group, nor am I an expert on the issue of governance, but I believe that the perspective of everyday Torontonians on this issue is of some value here. First, let me begin by saying that I am disappointed with the inadequate way in which this public input session was publicized. It's only due to my near pathological obsession with City Council matters that I was even aware of this today. Yeah, you help feed it, thanks. What's more, it's only by absolute good fortune that the meeting fell during what is for me a week of vacation time. I, like the majority of Torontonians, would be not able to be here this morning because I'm not available for morning meetings. I sincerely hope that the intention of this meeting is simply to get the ball rolling on the public consultation process and to determine how to conduct a series of robust, citywide, informative, and accessible consultations on the issue of governing this, because of the greatly reduced size of council. The reduction of the City Council was thrust upon Torontonians with no consultation whatsoever. So as to move towards rectifying this grievous error of the provincial government, this subcommittee must strive to develop a more extensive, well-publicized and transparent public consultation process. I support the recommendations on this matter made by the Harbert Village Residents Association in their letter to this committee, subcommittee. The best way to ensure adequate participation from the public is to hold a series of roundtable discussions throughout the city. This should be held on weekends, evenings, and during the day to accommodate Torontonians' diverse schedules. Otherwise, this process will lack the diversity that is reflective of this city and will leave out the voices of the vulnerable and marginalized, who tend to be the people who most rely on this level of municipal government, on the services, and are directly affected by it. In fact, if you just take a look at the demographics of this room right now, it doesn't look anything like the slice of Toronto that of Toronto population that I came on the subway with this morning. We have to have the people speaking reflect the people that actually live here. As of last night, when I checked the list of communications to the subcommittee, most of the submissions seem to be coming from Residents Association, but there appeared to be no residents groups from Scarborough speaking to this matter. So as a resident of Scarborough, I became all the more firmly committed to speaking here today, despite my lack of expertise on the matter. I have skimmed over the submissions of the Residents Associations, and I greatly appreciate the thoughtfulness, creativity, and effort they represent. However, this work cannot be left to the Residents Associations alone. As this map, which is kind of small, but as this map shows you, this is a map of Toronto Atlas of neighborhood groups and organizations, and I thank the Harbert Village Resident Association in their submission. They directed me to this. The different colors don't matter too much except for the black ones. The black and gray ones are the areas of what are they called? The organizations that are inactive or dormant. And so if you take a look at Scarborough, the blue are the areas that have something, and all the black is they don't have it anymore, and all the nothing is they've never had a social, some sort of organization. So I don't think that Scarborough in particular is being very well represented. If you look at the rest of the suburban North York, Etobicoke, you have the same sort of problem. So residents associations do great groups, great work, but we have to find ways of making sure we engage the suburban areas. I'm sorry, Councillor Holiday, that part of Etobicoke got cut off on that, but it's nothing black, or I think down New Toronto, you've got it? Yes, down in New Toronto, there's one group. So that's just little idea about how we have to make sure we try to engage other people that maybe aren't a member of a residents association or that type of neighborhood group. So, for example, in Scarborough, if we are going to have a more robust consultation process, such organizations like the Scarborough Civic Action Network and Taboo, you should get in touch with them to engage with them to see if they could facilitate a public consultation process. Just real quickly, how much? Okay. Oh, my time's up. I'm sorry. Thanks.
Do we have questions from outside members? Councillor Carroll?
I'm glad that we went back to this map, because I had some other questions for Mr. Nesland, and so couldn't get to this one. But I am struck by the areas where there is neither a colored community group or a black or gray community group, which means affiliated with nothing at all going on, not even dormant from before, just nothing ever.
Including my neighborhood.
One of the things that struck us was one of those places where it shows nothing ever is the east side of my ward, which Don Valley, but just past where you see the words Don Valley Village, on the other side of the 404, there are now two groups there, both really born out of participatory budgeting activities. In areas where you couldn't get people to talk, people across all economic levels are now in organizations, both tenants and owners, because someone put a real decision on the table and made them all be in the same room while they made it, as part of the pilot and also as part of using PB to determine Section 37 allocations. Do we need to do something big and bold and fill in this map? Should this map have something going on in every area?
Yeah, I think that would be marvelous. I'm sorry, I arrived late. I didn't know. Did Dave Nesland already showed you this? Oh, that's good. I'm glad. I'm sorry. I would have skipped things a little, through it a little faster, but maybe it's good that we had another chance to talk about it. You know, I'm also very involved with the climate action in the city, and that's usually why I come here. And I'm really wondering how, in terms of that, I've been wondering about that, and then when I saw this map and governing in general, how are we going to institute some of these ideas and transform TO about like we want to get, what is it called? Renewable energy network in neighborhoods, and we want to get together, they keep talking about these low carbon neighborhoods. Well, again, sorry to emphasize Scarborough, but just like look at that big empty space there. Yes. Like how, as an activist in Scarborough, it's really hard for me and a few others of us to try to get the ball rolling on these things. There are people that want to do them, but there's no groups to do it. So if I had a chance to talk more, in case there isn't another opportunity to put forward ideas, I really want to support the idea that Mary Hines had about the jigsaw approach. Or something like Los Angeles or New York or London, England does, where they do have that other strata of community that can deal with the things like the trees and the fences. I watched, this is how pathological I am, I watched the Scarborough Council January meeting, Scarborough, what's it called, Community Council, and a half hour was spent on a fence. And I mean, it was a really important issue to those people and should be heard, and it's great that you have that democratic process. But I know you 5 councillors have other things you should be doing, right? So that level of government would be helpful. Thanks for letting me get that in, even though
thank you
over time.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Because I had a couple.
Sure.
Do you have any suggestions for us on how neighborhood associations might be more effective at creating themselves? Is it a resource issue? Is it interest? What do you think the gap is?
I've never been on one of these associations, but I know people that are, and they're people who have the time and the money to do it. There are people who have time to come here today. Like, I normally, like I said, can't. I'm lucky to be free right now. And most of my friends in Scarborough we're busy, you know, and not that we're, when I go to things that Scarborough Civic Action Network does, yes, they come out. They'll come out in the evening, they'll make the time, they'll come out weekend, they provide daycare, they provide tokens if necessary to get people. If you can make it easier for people, instead of putting something at 9:30 in the morning that nobody knows about, then maybe it will come together. I mean, there are some gardening groups that I'm involved with in Scarborough that are a great community. I go every year to the Scarborough, the CD Saturday that they have. It gets a huge crowd, and there's all sorts of little groups that are doing things. But yeah, we need maybe some help from the city government on how to facilitate getting these groups together and making little councils. Yeah.
Okay. So you also brought up the idea of roundtables as a different way to talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any suggestions on how we would prepare people to participate in that discussion? I put to you as part of the question, it might be hard to kind of stop somebody on the street and say, we're trying to look at city council, what suggestions do you have on governance? Like, I think you might have to be a little bit more pointed in the questions that you put to people, and maybe provide some background on the difference between what the province does, the federals do, what we do, what's within our jurisdiction to change.
Oh, definitely.
So to be effective, how would you suggest that those would work?
Yeah, so the suggestion again that the representative from the Harbour Village Residents Association gave, and I was part of that process, the Transform TO process, that was really well done. There was round tables all over the city. They gave us information ahead of time so that we did know something. We didn't come in blank. And like even with this, like I'm making some suggestions about what we should do. I don't know if it's in the power of the city to do these things. Like, as we're a creature of the province, I don't know, can we elect a whole other level of government? I don't know. So you'd have to first give us this information and then let us give our ideas, because yeah, some of these out-of-the-box ideas, like Mary Hines' idea, is what we need. And as other people have said, we could really turn this into a real plus instead of just being, oh gosh, look what the province did and be miserable forever, which, you know, I tried that for 6 months. It hasn't worked so well for me. It's time to move on and use this as an opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Nope. The next speaker is John Bossons. Is John here? John Bossons. I've got the last name right. B-O-S-S-O-N-S.
Councillor, John Bossons was going to represent Fontra. In my absence, I was supposed to go to an LPAT meeting this morning. The LPAT meeting was cancelled, so therefore I'm able to attend this morning.
Yeah, okay. You're Jeff? Is that Jeff? Jeff, you're up next anyways, so that worked out well. All right, welcome, Jeff. You've got 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair, and members of the special committee. Basically, as you know, Fontra is an umbrella organization for about 30 resident associations in North Toronto and North York. We've here today basically to issue our indication of our support for the Harbour Village proposal on governance changes and the work of the special committee. Basically what we've heard today is some excellent advice from all over the world, as well as thoughts locally in terms of content from Dave Meslin and so on. The other aspect which Sue Dexter had raised with you is that of process. So content and process are both important and have to be resolved. So the provincially imposed changes to reduce the size of council has resulted in an increase in ward size and in the councillor to resident ratio. We agree with Councillor Holliday that the governance issues facing the residents of the City of Toronto include how it's impacted. We need to identify how it's impacted and how it may impact the governance, and make suggestions for changes to the governance structure. The proposal proposed by Harbour Village includes a number of aspects. It includes a brainstorming sessions taking those ideas, grouping them and filtering them, developing tangible options, public forums to review those options, and coming back with recommendations. And there needs to be strong public engagement, outreach, testing councillor opinion. The councillors are the ones here who are lived experience, as it were, of the changes resulting from the how their lives are changing. Devising changed roles for the public. The idea of community boards, whether advisory or decision-making, and the role for community resident associations. We are pleased that the city has agreed, this hasn't been mentioned today, but we're aware and supportive of your decision as a council to continue to oppose in the courts the untimely provincially directed change, and I personally am involved in that as an intervener. However, in the meantime, we believe that the city needs to proactively address the kind of remedial measures that are required to ensure that the city continues to be a place where residents are respected and empowered as partners in governance. We recommend that the proposal on governance changes and the work of the special committee be adopted as a template for the work of the special committee. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking to us. Do we have questions from outside councillors? Councillor Carroll, then?
Yeah, just quickly, because I didn't get a chance to really go through Sue's presentation for Harvard, the printed version of it, until after. So I'm going to ask you the question that I should have asked Susan Dexter. I don't know if you've noticed, but we have a full schedule of meetings now for this year for the Special Governance Committee. But if we were to embark on what they suggest, which is that, you know, as soon as possible, end of March, whatever, start a process where we really do open it up, do the brainstorming session as sort of a large-scale consultation, similar to what I was describing, the Monk School thinks we should be doing every term for budget. It says start this special committee on governance process with a big community brainstorming, and then the staff should have the time to go away and group them, begin to figure out which ones are viable and report back. That kind of, it leaves us with, spend some time on this, and then have your meetings. Have the community process first and really inform your agenda, which would mean the meetings that we have scheduled for next month or the month after that really should be put on hold until we've listened to what ideas are generated. You support that idea?
Well, I think the other partner in this whole process that hasn't been mentioned at all is the Toronto Public Service. We're not aware of what department. I assume it's the city manager's office, but there's been no public discussion about who's going to handle this from a staff perspective. It's going to need to be, this process is going to be dependent on the resources given to it, and we're suggesting an enhanced, supporting an enhanced process at the front end, but continuing. It does take analysis. It does take policy expertise to work through these ideas that Nesland and other people have talked about, and the ideas that are coming up through these forums. It's going to have to be massaged and assessed and brought back with a big involvement of staff.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Appreciate you speaking to us. Our next speaker is Derek Moran. Welcome, Derek. You have 5 minutes.
I just want to say, by me speaking at this meeting, this shall not be deemed to be in any way my consent expressed or implied, and doing so is fraud. God bless Her Majesty the Queen, and long live Her Majesty the Queen. And let the record show, I do not consent to the unconstitutional searches violating Section 8 of the Constitution Act 1982 that are currently taking place here at Toronto City Hall, as the province has never given the City of Toronto express statutory authority to do this. So, yeah. By the way, just so I got this clear, did I hear from Dave Nesland here that you can ask questions at Montreal City Hall? And I just want to let him know. And I just want to let him know. You can also ask questions at Hamilton City Hall because the version of Don Pete for the mayor's office at Hamilton, confirmed it, told me so over Twitter. Isn't that great? So that you're transparent in Hamilton and Montreal, but not here in Toronto. So I just want to remind all of you just who exactly you all work for. And actually, Premier Ford here did a great job at that press conference. Underneath here it says Ford on Toronto City Council, most dysfunctional political arena in the country. And what he had to say was, I promised we would get Ontario back on track. I ran on a commitment to restore accountability and trust and end their culture of waste and mismanagement in government. Because one thing every politician at every level and every region needs to remember is that we all share the same boss. We all work for the people. And I just, for those who don't know, you guys had a special meeting regarding this council cut where Mayor Tory gave a speech, and this is what he had to say. Every single person in this room takes their duty to the people of Toronto seriously. The councillors in this room all put themselves forward for public office, and our city staff serve us and serve the public every single day. And both groups are dedicated to the best interests of the people and of the city government. And while we as a municipality must always acknowledge that we exist and operate within the context of a Canadian Constitution, which is ironic as Section 8, again, like I just mentioned, is being violated downstairs, it is our duty to represent the people of Toronto and the best interests of the cities at all times. Isn't that wonderful? The problem with that is, like, does anyone in this room actually know what those duties, because there's more than one, I don't know if Mayor Tory knows that, what those duties are that you actually owe to us, the people. Because as a suggestion, more like a direction or instruction, I think it'd be great if you put it on the City of Toronto's website and gave us proper public notice just what exactly those duties are that you owe to the public. I don't think that's expecting too much. Another thing I want to point out people don't realize is, ironically, this was, here's picture of Mayor Tory there. That was from the ward boundary item from October 26, 2016 Executive Committee, where Mayor Tory says, this place is broken. I don't know how badly broken it is, but it's broken in terms of how effectively it works for the people, but it's also broken in terms of how we function. Absolutely, wholeheartedly agree with him. And here's a perfect example of how broken this place is. This is from June 28, 2018 Toronto City Council meeting, where then Councillor Maria Audremary says, and as I walked in, this was the discussion that was happening. There were a group of developers and businessmen, and what they were saying was, oh, that Fillion, that John Fillion, all we get is you have to follow the rules, and you have to do this, and you have to do that, and you have to think about the Edithville Community Center in Section 37, and this, we can't take it anymore. But these other guys, you know, these other guys, what they want is a trip to Florida, and so on, and their bank accounts, and you can imagine, you can fill in the rest. But what I learned was that for the developers, it didn't matter to them if they gave money to your private bank account or to the Edithville Community Center. It was the cost of doing business. It might be me, but like then Councillor Maria Audremary basically just implied that there either were and or still are members of Toronto City Council that are on the take from land developers. So we're here talking about 45 members of council, 26 members of council. What difference does it make if there's even one member of council that is not representing the people of Toronto, but instead serving the interests of the land developers, the condo developers, the special interest groups, or the lobbyists of Toronto? That needs to be fixed.
Thank you, Derek. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you for joining us. Our next speaker is Edward Zaretsky. Welcome, Edward. You have 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Edward Zaretsky, and I ran in the last municipal election October 25th. Thank you for making this first meeting available to the public and candidates who ran in the last municipal election. But first and foremost, I would like to make a suggestion that anything to do with running a municipal election should not be governed and run by the City of Toronto and its councillors. The last election was the worst that I've ever seen run by people who have no concern for the voting public. I'm a federal returning officer for York Centre and was the one who initialized placing polling stations in apartments and condominiums. In the past federal, provincial, and municipal elections, polling stations were positioned in major buildings that had space available to run out. Bear this in mind that I'm only referring now to Ward 6, the newly created one by downsizing from 47 to 25 councillors, and no others at the present time. Ward 6 violated voters' rights when the city clerks who ran said election was advised many times prior to the election, refused to change or amend the polling stations throughout this ward. I advised Carol Baker, Fiona Murray, Yuli Watkins about polling stations that they said they could do nothing about it and passed by the board. One of the specific polls I'm concerned about is referring to the polls that was held at 4455 Bathurst Street, a building run by the City of Toronto in public housing. 4455 Bathurst Street was going to house the following locations, one huge square block that contained the following locations: number 1, 15, 25, 35, 100 Canyon Avenue, plus 4455 Bathurst Street, which are high-rise apartments that had thousands of apartments into 4455 Bathurst Street, also a high-rise that had over 300 suites in itself. Said nothing about the polling station being handled in such a poor way that the people couldn't get out to vote. Nobody was going to walk so far a distance, being handicapped or young people, to go to vote in a building that they had to go in a rear door, down a long hallway, down 2 stories to a voting station. Nobody was going to do that, and the turnout was terrible. This vote cost tens of thousands of people in that ward. I'm protesting this vote in this election for Ward 6. I'm also complaining that how could this former City Council of 47 councillors have allowed Councillor James Pasternak to run for re-election when I complained to every member of this board that he abused the city's monies for TTC tokens, and he slandered me, and he got City Council to pay over $20,000 for his legal action, and he lost. How can you people complain that you have no money in the City of Toronto when you allow something like this to happen? He should not have been able to run if City Council would have at least reprimanded him.
If I can stop you for one moment.
For verification.
If I can just ask that you not personalize any of the comments.
I'm sorry?
Can I ask that you do not personalize the comments and just direct your comments through the chair to the committee? And I'll just take a moment to remind you that we're going to focus on governance rather than an individual. Thank you.
This polling of Ward 6 was the worst. Tens of thousands of people were not allowed to vote. They were mustered to go from one building, huge distance to vote when they had no reason to do that. This elections should not be run by City Council or city people. It should be run by the province or a special group of people designed.
I'm just going to finish in a second. Thank you. Are there any questions from visiting members of council? Councillor Carroll.
Thanks. Are you familiar with some of the areas where that is the case? You know, you've raised some problems that in our current system, our current legislative constraint, staff very much will want to resolve. But there are jurisdictions, New York City, for instance, for election structure and for campaign finance, it's a separate authority. that sits outside of council, sits outside of the regular bureaucracy, kind of like our Toronto Parking Authority. It's the authority model. Are you suggesting something like that?
No, I'm saying when I contacted the people in charge of city clerk's office, they told me that the money was being downsized and done through city council. They downsized it. Okay?
That too is correct, and that too could be corrected.
Okay. That's what they told me in an email that I have. Okay? And I'm only referring to Ward 6.
Yes.
I ran in that ward, and I know that ward. Okay? I don't know about the other wards. They could be the same problem. You cannot take away voters' rights for a polling station. And you have to prove to me how you saved money. I don't believe it. I'm a federal returning officer, and I don't believe what you're telling us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Are there any other questions? No? Thank you for speaking to us today.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Veronica Wynn. Good morning, Veronica.
Good morning, and thank you
minutes.
for the opportunity to speak. I'm the Vice President of the Swansea Area Ratepayers Association, and we're just coming up on our 90th anniversary of being an incorporated ratepayer group. So we have a wealth of experience, and we have been a ratepayer group that has seen the transition of the municipality of the village of Swansea being amalgamated into the city of Toronto in 1967. So as an area, we are very diversified in our zoning attributes. We have so that we have a myriad of, if you have a zoning aspect, you can name it and it'll be in Swansea. So we are advocating for having another layer of government that will be the Ratepayers Association based on that, based on the Ratepayers Association being that, and adding what is called a decision-making aspect to their initiatives, because as a group we actually have a model for involving the community, which is like subgroups. We have the South Swansea South Kingsway Neighbourhood Committee. We've had the South Swansea Neighbourhood Group. We've we now have the Save Swansea Committee. We now have the Riverside Drive Neighbourhood Group, and they all operate, and we support them, and by guiding them through the processes, because that will extend how we operate. Because as an executive, our time is limited, and because we have such diverse issues in our group, that we need to do that. We need to engage the community, and we've quite as Councillor Perks has just recently become aware, we're quite activist in the positive sense in how we do things. We have also been a party to OPA 320, 56913. We have, and that's on the positive side. We've worked with the city, and they've been very engaged with us, because we have supported positive change for healthy neighbourhoods and that. So, but we've also been part of DPS, which I don't think they would welcome our contribution too much. So, but the thing is, we have a citywide perspective, but we also have a local. We also invite our groups, our neighbours to either, whether they're developing their houses, they come to us to see if the plans will work before the Committee of Adjustment, or we have the neighbours come along who say, okay, how can they take action against the person who's doing the renovation? So And our last councillor has had occasion to say had to thank us for making our job easier. So on that basis, we are asking that that the plan would be to recognize the incorporated area associations by providing per capita funding along with spending regulations and requirements to enable decision-making, and that our groups would be responsible to the community, would not be associated with any political party, and must be autonomous. We would be able to make independent decisions and also have our decisions respected. This will provide another layer of governance and support at a time of shrinking City Council governance. Improve communication between area associations and the city departments, which should have liaison officers to respond to contacts and queries from these organisations. Provide for staffing at the councillor's office and meeting space in the community to meet with the area associations. Legislate a greater role for meaningful consultation with the area associations. I think our group is unique because all the surrounding associations don't have all those attributes, like a secondary plan or tall buildings or mixed use. We have a lakefront issues and things like that. We have riverside issues. We have a High Park issue. So we, I think included in the process, the communication process should be there. I was disappointed that it only came to our attention about a week ago. Otherwise, we would have definitely have a more extensive presentation and backup to support our issues. And I hope that we will be asked to be involved down the road to help, as we have done extensively for the past 90 years.
Thank you.
Okay.
With that, are there any questions from members visiting the committee? Any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we have one more speaker, Sean Mahar. Welcome, Sean. You've got 5 minutes.
Hi. I'm grateful to the chair for calling this meeting and for the committee for giving the public a chance to speak about this important issue. You have a really tough task. A 25-member council is a challenge, but it shouldn't be a challenge that undermines the fundamental goals of council. Council has said that housing is a critical issue. Other deputants have outlined that in detail already, but as the people at this table know all too well, as the people who work in housing know, as the folks who are on the front lines, who work in policy, who do the day-to-day work know, housing is a really complex issue. It's best dealt with in a comprehensive and coherent way. The continuum from homelessness to shelters to supportive and transitional housing to social housing and other forms of permanent housing ought to be dealt with by a single committee. For housing to work, supports matter and community services matter, and the need to have a fully integrated strategy matters a great deal. Unfortunately, the structure that you have right now divides those functions across committees, with homelessness and shelters and associated supports and social housing going to economic and community development, and Housing Now and the Affordable Housing Office reporting to planning and housing. No serious effort to address housing can be undertaken without recognizing how closely interconnected all of those functions are. And no council decision-making process that makes housing a priority should separate those. Ideally, council should continue with its 2018 commitment to create a standalone housing committee that looks at the full spectrum of those issues. And barring a standalone committee, the committee structure that you arrive at should weave back together again social development and housing issues so that social shelter housing and support issues all report to the same committee at the same time. That fundamental binding of those issues is critically important to the success of the housing strategy, and I encourage the committee to look at that. The other challenge you face is how do you do all this work with just 25 councillors? And as I often do when I'm faced with big challenges about how the city should work, I turn to our former mayor, Mel Lastman, for the answers. And Mel taught us a bunch of things. And one of them was that a council of 56 members, only 56 members, because that was a stark reduction when Mel started out, is just too small to do it all. At 56, Mel Lastman thought we didn't have enough people around the table to really think this stuff through. And that's why he created a variety of processes to engage citizens more effectively. Why he created a Children and Youth Action Committee so that parents and teachers and childcare workers and people who are involved in the lives of children could come together with city councilors to do some of the heavy lifting and thinking about public policy and feed that into the decision-making process at City Hall. He created an Access and Equity Working Group. He created an Affordable Housing Group. He created a Women's Committee. He created a variety of those engaged processes where citizens came together with councillors to give input to the process, and then the council decision-making process picked up from that heavy lifting. The second thing that we see from Mel was that in 1999, when the equivalent of this committee was sitting and trying to figure out how to engage citizens well, they didn't run off and say, well, there's 10 of us around the table, we can figure this out. They said, let's really engage the public. Let's hold a very large forum out there in the open where citizens can come and residents can come from all over the city to talk about how to do this well. We didn't try and do it in a tiny little brain trust. We tried to really engage people to think about engagement. So I would encourage you to draw on both of those lessons from Mel. Last, I would encourage you to think about the fact that we have technology now that works in a way that Mel didn't have. We have some advantages over that council. And one is that we could hold committee meetings that don't all happen in one place. We could be holding this committee meeting simultaneously in Scarborough and Etobicoke and North York, using video technology to enable people who live in Scarborough to be able to depute without having to travel an hour each way. For people who live in Rexdale and in the Lakeshore to come into the conversation without having to come all the way downtown. So I'd encourage you to think about those opportunities. Because I have about 20 seconds left, I will cheat a little bit and comment on the next item, which is about term limits, rather than depute separately there, and just say democracy is about people choosing their representatives. Rules that say they don't get to choose who they want aren't particularly democratic, and I'd encourage you to turn that aside. Thank you.
Thank you. Look at that, 20 seconds under.
There we go. Speed is my strength.
Have we just check with outside members? No questions? Councillor Bylaw?
Sean, just a quick question. Just want to hear your thoughts. So let's say the committee decides that, we can't really go more than 4 standing committees, right? And so when we're talking about housing, so I think that we've never had housing all under one committee. We were very close, very close, and unfortunately,
you almost got it there. Keep going, keep going.
And unfortunately, this all happened.
Yeah.
And the decision, I think, to put it in the planning is because there's so much building that needs to happen. And we continuously hear from people of supportive housing, rooming housing, Airbnb. It's all planning, housing, zoning issues. And we thought, okay, we need to connect these somehow. Mm-hmm. Is it your recommendation that if we need to do that then everything else, housing, just joins in there? Or separate that from planning?
I would think that it makes a lot more sense for economic development work not to be married to the social development and housing work. That I think
bring the other part to planning and housing.
You could bring the other part to planning and housing. I'll share my personal view, which is that I think the planning functions and how they affect housing are less interwoven. They're structural rather than ongoing. So if you had to split them, I would split out planning. But in a perfect world, what I'd say is bring planning and housing and social development together in a way where we're talking about building healthy cities that work for folks, and separate out economic development in another field.
So put all the housing with the planning and separate the economic development. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, I'm interested in your idea that committees can hit the road. Because we have a model of that from my point of view, does seem to be building a bit. Councillor Crawford's budget process requires us to go on the road for deputations. The difficulty is we do it in halves of committees. We try to double up on one night and be in two places at once, so the whole committee isn't hearing what's coming in together and ruminating over it together. But it is building, and so we've begun to get used to it and benefit from it, in my view. Are you suggesting that this committee could model that before deciding future committees could do it? And if so, we're sitting on a three-item agenda here. Could we start later in the day and be out and about in the other 4 districts and actually build on the impact of this committee?
Yeah, I think we could. I think you'd have the capacity with the tech. You have great tech people here, by the way, and they're hiding there behind the screens, but they do just wonderful work. The fact that people can watch from home the council meetings, understand what's going on, they can call their councillors literally in real time to say what's going on with this. I think that's a great service to the public. I think the next logical step, and the skills of the team here could deliver that, is you could be having this meeting right now in all 4 regions of the city. And some of you could be in one room and some of you could be in another. You could have the budget committee meetings that happened recently in Scarborough and Etobicoke at the same time, and have everybody hear every deputation in both places, because we have these giant screens and this good technology and this great tech team.
Excellent, thank you.
And I think the idea of this committee modeling that as we move forward is a wonderful idea, because we haven't done it before. And the roadshow version of you take the whole committee out and they go to places all over the place, and it just means you're cut off from different people. And I think that there's an opportunity to not be cut off from anybody, and especially not to be cut off from the folks in the inner suburbs who deserve to have a voice at this table and don't ever get to have as much of one as they should have.
Thank you. I do have some follow-on questions to that. I'm intrigued by the idea of a video link, but I want to see how far you see that as being feasible. Would you advocate for committee members to be dispersed or committee members to be in one spot?
I tend to encourage committee members to be in one spot. I think there's some virtues to having people spread out, and I think there's something nice about the budget committee, as Councillor Crawford's instituted, being out there in different neighborhoods and being physically present. But there is some need for you and your colleagues to confer with each other, to sort things out, and that's harder to do over distance. It's not impossible. I know you all text each other during council meetings as well as getting together and talking in real life. But I would tend to prefer having the councillors in one place and then letting everybody participate. But there's nothing to stop that place from being the Scarborough Community Council chamber, and having everybody in downtown Toronto watch that on a screen and give their input through technology.
Would you advocate for it going further outside of the bounds of a city hall set of locations? Do you see a day where we would go to a video link into people's homes as an opportunity to depute? Or is that maybe a little too far?
I think that there's something fundamental about the way that people engage with each other, and it being something that at its essence has a live component. So I think completely fragmenting it would be unfortunate. But I do think you could gather at the Rexdale Hub just as easily as at the Etobicoke Community Council chamber. And I do think that you could get people to gather in the recreation space at Finch Brahms as easily as you get them to go down to Mallasman Square.
So one of the complaints I've received over time is specifically around community councils where somebody's there for their item, right? Mm-hmm. Their fence or their tree or whatever it is. Would you say that this process should go into every decision, or could it be targeted towards certain ones that are more citywide or more widespread, rather than something quite unique where you may invite so many participants that it becomes a drawn-out process for the observers to say, look, I'm not going to sit here for a day to find out the outcome. I just want to say my part.
Yeah, and I'm prepared to live without knowing how a tree debate goes in agent court. So I think that there is some wiggle room there. I think it ends up being an empirical question, and you're going to want to test it out a little bit, which is why I kind of like Councillor Carroll's suggestion that you might want to road test it a little to see what that threshold is. But I do think that you have the capacity to do a lot better than we're doing right now.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? None. Thanks for joining us. So that was the last speaker on the list. I just want to do a last call for Kyle Iannuzzi, and I think John Bossons, if either one of those people have come. Just checking the last two speakers that we missed during the day. Just a last call. If not, thank you to our speakers. We'll take this into a committee for questions. Any questions by visiting members of council? Any questions of staff by members of the committee? Councillor Perks.
So I've got a few. I understand that informally there's a conversation going on about the next meeting maybe having a proposed work plan from staff. Is that, yes?
Thank you, through the chair. Our intent is to actually take the kind of a summary of what we've heard today and the submissions, kind of scope work plan for the committee and come forward with some proposals for how we might address some of those issues, a kind of high-level review of what is within the city's jurisdiction or previous current council directions and decisions, and then start to think a little bit about how we might engage more broadly on those items.
So some of the comments that we heard today about getting a more robust consultation plan would be addressed in that next report from you.
Certainly. So this is a standing committee, so it of course has a kind of a notice process that we used. We, communicated through Twitter and through a press release and so on. But an engagement process would include some recommendations about broader communications and involvement of the public. Yeah.
Okay.
We would bring that forward to this committee to make a decision on at the next meeting.
And one of the challenges, obviously, is going to be the issue of scope. I mean, when you say governance, it literally refers to every single thing that happens here. I mean, all of the authority city staff have, technically, council has voted to delegate to you. So that's all the work you guys do is actually part of governance, in a sense, too, right?
Mr. Chair, when the committee was struck, there was a specific mandate assigned to the committee, which was for the committee to look at the the impact of the reduction in council. The mandate of the committee, oh, it's on the screen. Meg's pointing out to me. So, the committee's ambit is sort of set out in what council approved.
Right, but I just walk with me here for a second. I could make the case that because of the reduction in the size of council, the balance of decision-making authority has changed, including how we relate to our agencies, how we oversee city staff, how we work with the public. So literally every aspect of what we do is changed. And I'm just wondering how you draw a circle around that for that report that you want to do.
Well, Mr. Chair, you probably won't like this answer, but this is up to the committee to decide. I think the committee has some latitude here. I mean, governance is a system. It's a system of structures, a system of processes and powers and duties and so forth. So, there is a conceptually a boundary around what a governance system is, but we're really looking for the committee's insights and direction in terms of how you want to address your mandate.
So the work plan that you bring, that I understand Councillor Holyday is going to move a motion on, the work plan that you bring may have some ideas about what pieces of governance we need to review, but they would be suggestions that the committee can fiddle with, because we're fiddlers.
Absolutely. I would say any instructions you want to give us today or any hints you want to give us today through the discussion here, that's certainly helpful. Or in the alternative, when we report back with something, then the committee has the opportunity to amend it and adjust the scope.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, I just want to be clear from staff's perspective. When we look at the mandate that was originally envisioned before it came to council, which is where that comes from, it uses the word governance, quite a bit, but whether or not that includes electoral reform is open to interpretation. But I would submit council has made an interpretation now by referring the term limits question here. That is an electoral reform. And so I'm just wondering if I can get staff's perspective. I'm happy to support a motion that asks you to come back with a work plan. But having heard the deputations, having seen council's action in referring term limits here, are you envisioning including some aspects of electoral reform in reporting back to us on a work plan?
Thank you. To the Chair, I imagine that what we would be presenting to you is a range of options and themes that are in front of the committee, either by submission or by referral from council, for example, as you've noted the other motion. We would look to see what is our legislative jurisdiction over those issues. We would provide some very high level, maybe a legal or a kind of a governance summation of maybe previous council decisions on those items, so that you can then select the kind of scope that you would like to go forward, maybe direct us to do other research or to do other work. But I don't think we would exclude anything right now until we actually do that. We're unclear until attending the meeting today what other items might come up before we didn't want to judge where we might head.
So grouping, theming what we've heard today, we can decide later if that's a deep dive or a tweak. Yeah.
Certainly there are meetings scheduled of this committee to the end of the year.
Yes, yes. Okay, okay. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Carl. And maybe I'll just ask a couple of my own to clarify and elaborate just on the 5 meetings that are scheduled. One is today, and there will be a follow-up one coming shortly, where a motion of mine may say, come back with a work plan. But would there be opportunities in the subsequent meetings to dig into detailed issues and have resources, the clerks, lawyers, whoever it is, come back with detailed information to the committee on subjects that we're interested in getting into?
Certainly, I would imagine that a work plan would start to detail how that might be possible. Certainly, if there were requests for presentations or further discussions, absolutely, I think that it's within the realm of possibility for this committee to undertake that work.
So the committee was originally set up as part of the large report to council about various committee structures, and if you look at the language on the mandate of this committee from that report, it suggests that it is something that is reacting to a change in council size. Would it be a reasonable assertion that this committee has been tasked to come back to council with a reaction to the change in council size through this process, and therefore we are angling towards some sort of a report back, maybe towards the end of the year?
I imagine that certainly on direction of this committee, we would report back. I think one of the things to consider, just to your point, is we did want initially to allow the current interim process to kind of roll out a little bit for us to be able to understand more about how the structure that is currently in place is working or not working. And so that's why we scheduled meetings through to the end of the year, so there'd be some opportunity for us to assess that as well.
Right, so that would be a culmination towards the end of the year, but that would give councillors at least a year of going through the 4 seasons in the city, going through a number of meeting cycles to get a good assessment of whether or not that governance report from December got it right.
Certainly not to rush to make those decisions, yes.
And I guess the last thing, if the committee is to consider a work plan, would it be your recommendation that committee balance, the enormous plethora of ideas that have come forward to us with the utility of actually coming back with some sort of a report to council and having a manageable amount of work to get done over the course of the year?
I guess I leave it to the committee to decide what that balance is, that scope, yeah.
All right, thank you. I had no other questions. Are there any other questions from the committee members? I'll invite any visiting members of council to speak. Councillor McKelvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to draw attention to the submission from Andrew Thompson, the Chief of Government Relations. And he's drawing attention to a report that was conducted in 2017 called A Practical Blueprint for Change as part of the City Hall Task Force at the Monk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. And what this task force did is brought together nine professionals, political professionals, and I'm going to read out your names because I think it speaks to the credibility of the panel. Adrian Batra, who was former press secretary to the Mayor Rob Ford, Shirley Hoy, former city manager, Siobhan Palavitsayan, hopefully I said that right, CEO of Civic Action, John Parker, a former city councilor, deputy speaker, Joe Penichetti, former city manager, David Signacki, former city councilor and budget chief, Zach Taylor, assistant professor, Western University, Ange Valentini, chief of staff to Councillor Adam Bond, and Bianca Wiley, head of the Open Data Institute of Toronto. This report has 14 recommendations that fall along 6 priorities, and some of these are include being able to set better strategic priorities for the city, being able to more effectively monitor agencies, boards, and corporations, being better able to delegate authority to different committees to streamline the governance process, and how to include public engagement. I really want to strongly encourage this committee in some capacity to look thoroughly through this report. Also, Andrew Thompson of the University of Toronto points out that there is the recently formed School of Studies that includes dozens of governance experts from across multiple disciplines, and he is, in his deputation that he submitted, offering the opportunity to connect with those resources. And on a final point, I do want to point out that we have a memorandum of understanding with the University of Toronto to conduct research, and there may be many topics that this committee is tackling that might fit well under that MOU stream, so I encourage you to consider all of that, and I'm happy to provide a copy of the report to anybody that wants it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKelvey, and I'll just point out to the committee members that that particular report is under communication number 3. So the committee members have it, and it's part of the record. Any other visiting members of council? Okay, members of council wishing to speak? Members of the committee, pardon me. Councillor Carroll.
Yes. I want to veer a little bit from what staff's answers were to my questions. The submissions to do with this item and the presentations made here in person clearly go across the lines. They gave us great advice on governance structure, day-to-day, committee structure, but clearly they also want us to look at the electoral impacts of moving to the 25. Clearly, they have some concerns about the powers of incumbency that we're going to deal with in another item. One of the submissions that's not attached to this item is attached to the next item on term limits. It's from Progress Toronto, and it's read the request for a report on implementation of term limits. If you look at the recommendations that come from that community group, and they are a community group like any other, certainly they have a political bent, but so does Adrian Batra, for instance, who sits on that group. So everyone has a political bent, including this group. But their recommendations, if you look at them, are peppered throughout the presentations we heard today. And so I'm wondering if we can veer a little from the fact that, or do I need to move a motion, that these be grouped, these recommendations be grouped and themed along with the presentations that were attached to the item we're considering now, even though they came for term limits? Oh, so I don't need to move a motion, that's just an undertaking then? I'm happy with an undertaking, having seen the nodding heads, because they are very much in line with what people are asking us to look at. I truly believe we do have to look at that. Because I think there's no question, and Councillor Bradford went there in one of our earliest possible council sessions. one of the biggest impacts of changing to 25 councillors, and I dare say it probably wasn't the intention of the Premier. The Premier was probably trying to shake up incumbency by making us all run against each other. What I worry about, and what I already sort of see demonstrated in my own ward, and I'm sure others do, is that it actually enhances the power of incumbency. Yep. Yet again. Under this scenario with such large representation areas, I'm not even sure ranked balloting is going to shake it. In fact, it may even make it even more powerful, because I can already feel people saying, oh, okay, I read the e-blast. Oh, it's about that side of the ward. I'm not going to read on. Oh, she's talking about that side of the ward. This doesn't relate to me. Our jurisdictions are now so large that just the scope of it is starting to drive people away. Oh, why do I care about a development at Bayview Village Mall when I live at Victoria Park and Shepherd? Because there's a mall on your side of town too, and we're setting a precedent over here. But I can't reach them to tell them that when I've got 120,000 people to reach. And so that power of incumbency, that sort of what's the use feeling, is actually going to be enhanced. And as incumbent as I am, I don't want to leave that legacy. And so I don't think we can look at the governance structure without looking at some level of looking at electoral reform. And I don't think you'll achieve it all in this little committee in 1 year's time. But I will say this, and I'll wrap up on this. I heard again and again and again people saying we've only ever once done governance reform, and that was at amalgamation, and that's actually not true. So we clearly failed to engage in other electoral reforms and governance reforms because they weren't aware of the many times we have tweaked and changed. We started out with a 2 councillors per ward, 56 member council. And we made a little change after just 1 term of that committee that so many people mentioned. We then had another governance committee where we went from having a policy and finance committee to the executive model. A whole governance reform went on to accompany the City of Toronto Act. It was chaired by Councillor Adam Jambroni. And no one mentioned it because we obviously failed to engage them in it. And so I think we've got to be broad here. And we may not achieve it all in our quick little 1-year committee. This committee may have to function for the whole term, or it may do part of the work with a mandate to recommend that it be done at the beginning of every term. I think we do have to broaden it a little bit, because we're clearly not reaching and impacting people as we should. Even the highly engaged who came today aren't aware of some of the work we've done.
Thank you, Councillor. Other members of council. Councillor Perks.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for calling the meeting, and thank you to all of the deputants. The problem with an issue like this is that it is simultaneously so big and so small that it's almost impossible to figure out what it is. It's like a bunch of blindfolded people. You know, the famous thing where a bunch of blindfolded people each trying to figure out what an elephant looks like, and I've got this, it's like a fire hose because I've got the trunk, right? And we're sort of a little bit at that stage right now. And I think that having an initial meeting where we just open the conversation was very important. The one thing that I did note, though, is I think that members of the public don't even have the information about how our governance structures work that would allow them to give us the best input they could. So I'm hopeful that as staff are working on devising the initial advice and work plan and consultation plan, a very important part of that is to make public, not through trying to trace the TIMIS, what committee meeting agenda item, and you know, where's the background report tip portal, but to have a separate portal the way we do for the budget, or the way we did for Transform TO, to have right up on the front top of the city's homepage, the thing that scrolls by saying, we're redesigning the government. Do you want to be well represented or not? Here's information on how we currently govern here's information on what some of the live questions are. And I think some of the stuff that we need to make available to the public to understand this conversation. I remember 2 or 3 terms ago, the clerk's office for a couple of years ran sort of a Civics 101. That was you guys, right? City manager's office. Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. I apologize to the city manager's office. It's just that we've been reducing the number of policy staff and increasing the number of communications staff in his office today. I wasn't aware that there were any policy staff left. Sorry, I just had to throw that in. But among the things that, yeah, just the quiet part, right? Among the things that I think would be helpful is to dig through some of that old material. I think also if there were a plain language way of explaining the framework agreements we have with our various boards and agencies, because people come to me all the time and say, can you get a police officer to stand in my corner? And I have to explain, well, no, actually city councillors can't do that. But some of that for our various boards and agencies. I think we also need to help the public understand just how much of the public service and the various tribunals and general manager's powers are actually powers that belong to council that we have decided proactively to delegate. And we could delegate to some other entity if we so choose. So just giving a sense of what some of that is. Going along with some of the things I heard during deputations, Mr. Nesland mentioned something about random draws for certain kinds of participation in the city. The province of Ontario currently does something like that for jury duty. So there may be pieces that we could look at where that might make some sense. A thing that the former City of Toronto used to do that might be helpful in looking at, there was a thing called the Blue Book, which was a listing, it was a document you could get, which was a listing of all the residents associations and community agencies within the former City of Toronto that was publicly available. It was actually a physical book that we handed out to people. Another thing we may want to look up, one of the recommendations in the document Councillor McKelvey was talking about, actually we did that in the term 2006 to 10 with the Listening to Toronto process, where we went out at the beginning of the term and asked everybody in Toronto and in different parts of the city, what do you think we should be doing? Going along with what Councillor Carroll said, I think it's time to re-examine the question of a permanent voters list and enumeration, and to look again at permanent resident voting, if we're going to be looking into questions of governance and inclusion. I would encourage you also to look at the multi-layered consultation plan we had for Transform TO. It had several things going in parallel. And in all of that work, to be mindful of the question of social capital and people's ability to participate right now. Thank you.
Before we go forward, I'd just do a time check, see what the will of the committee is, if anyone wants to place a motion to either finish this item or finish the agenda. Move to complete. Yeah, we've got 2 guest speakers and Councillor Bradford signed up for the 3rd item. So you want to go through the rest of the agenda? Yes. Okay. All in favor? Okay. Okay, then let's... Brief, okay. Councillor Bailão.
No, we're going to be very brief. I do have a motion, and so I want to echo some of the comments that my colleagues did, but I want to put a motion in here because there was something that a lot of the residents talked about the involvement of the residents associations and about organizing and supporting them, and that is something that could be done sooner rather than later. And I think if we as a city have an office that supports the business improvement areas, it makes total sense to have an office that supports neighborhoods associations. And this was actually a motion that was already at executive last term, and it was referred to the city manager. So this was at executive last term, referred to the city manager. I'm using exactly the same language, bringing it back to this special committee and involving in the work that we're doing today. But I think that given in consideration that you know, our residents are already getting organized. We're going to have a summit. I think that we as a city should be able to support. I think it is really important for the work that we do. I know that when the community is organized, when we have strong residents associations, it's much better for us to do our job. It is much better to represent the community. And so I would like to see a report coming back on this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Question of the mover, Councillor Parks.
Could this be done in a way so that that's something that they consider when they're devising the work plan? There may be other paths to provide this service, and I don't want to prejudge it until we've had the larger could be part of the initial work plan report?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know if the clerks can figure out how to do that, but in the initial work plan report, city staff consider the feasibility and opportunities and creation of Ontario and Office of Neighbourhoods of the City of Toronto.
Yeah.
So do we have that, a friendly amendment, I
just
guess?
want to include it in this work, because it's out there, and so I want to bring it.
As opposed to a standalone report, come back in the next, got it. Are we clear with that? All right. In the interest of time, is there any other speakers? Thank you. I've got obviously a motion, and if I can have those put on the screen, I've actually got two. I'll read them, that we ask the city manager and the city clerk to consider all of the deputations we heard today and the submissions, to Councillor Carroll's point, that were submitted to this committee in written form, and come back to our next meeting with a recommended work plan to the committee. And the second component to this is, again, based on some of the comments, is to look to see if there's a way that we can do a public consultation process or a roundtable process, which is beyond this committee meeting right here, or the next five, which would give an enhanced opportunity for citizen engagement, and come back in a report and tell us how to do that. I just want to thank all of people that came out to speak today. I take to heart some of the comments that, you know, there wasn't a lot of notice. I think there was a concerted effort to try and give as much lead time as we could through the structure of the committees that we have to post notice on this. I think there was even a press release put out to try to get people aware that we're going to start somewhere with the committee, and where we started was, let's look at the report that went to council that never really got to be discussed. We, at our first council meeting, had to deal with a change structure. I think we did the best we could. We took some great advice from the city clerk, and we've fashioned together what you see before you right now. But I think as councillors, we are still learning what the impacts of that is, and it's going to take us some time to figure it out. I mentioned it before, it's seasonal as well. I mean, we go through different seasons of the year, and it affects the way that we function at City Hall. So I think towards the end of the year, we'll have a better sense as councillors and how our job works, but also the citizens of the city and how they engage with us. So I'm looking forward to this journey going forward. I think there's still going to be lots of opportunity for people to bring forward ideas for this committee to consider. And what I really hope is this committee will have a chance to really get into the depths of a couple of the topics that we truly want to get investigating, so that it's not a superficial glance over, but we can really talk about some items. And we're going to have to turn our minds as a committee to figuring out what we want to look at next. Anyhow, with that, the motions are there before us. We can just do these in the right order. So Councillor Bailau's motion to look at, as part of the work plan report, the feasibility of the neighbourhood's offices and the best practices. All those in favour? Any opposed? That carries.
Mr. Chair, on that last motion, Deputant Mary Hines is concerned because she didn't submit hers in writing, so let the record show there were dice, there were blocks, there were all sorts of things.
Tape. You guys can view the digital record of the meeting.
It was memorable.
Acknowledged. And the last will be the last two motions that I just read out. All of those in favour? Any opposed? And that is carried. Okay, on to the third item, GV 1.3, request for report and implementation of term limits. We have 3 speakers, including Councillor Bradford. The first one is Alan Kaspersky. Welcome back, Alan. Thank you. As you're aware, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure how this works, but Councillor Bailão, in your motion, you mentioned North American best practices. Fair enough. Then my comments would be that best practices quite often come from all kinds of places. And I would suggest that when we talk about term limits, talk about electoral reform, I've had conversations with your counterparts in Madrid, and they have opened an invitation for any of you to speak directly to them, which I'm happy to tee up, to staff. I'm happy to tee them up with you, because they've built a technology platform that would address an awful lot of what you do, what you want to do with this consultation. And the good news is it's open source, which means there isn't a price to it, a license fee. But let me speak to term limits. None of my comments should be construed as being personal or being negative, but the notion of term limits quite often is that they are there to solve a problem, that they are positive, that term limits will help in a variety of different perceived problems that an elected body may have. Aaron Sorkin, noted political commentator, was quoted as saying, "You should be nervous about laws that fundamentally assume that the people of Toronto cannot be trusted." Term limits aim to address diversity, gender diversity, political diversity, social economic diversity. But what it effectively does is it says, you don't trust me. You don't trust that I recognize that I don't like this councillor or that councillor, and that they're incompetent, inept, or they've just been there too long. Term limits suggest, and this is unlike any other endeavor that I'm aware of, that length of service for any of you is a bad thing. Because the longer you're there, the staler your ideas are, the lack of any new thinking you have. I don't think that makes any sense. I think with term limits, you lose institutional memory, you lose experience, expertise. But I think one of the things that you'll face with term limits, I think they're illegal. Because effectively, it's enforced retirement. And we don't allow enforced retirement. It'd be an interesting, case if that ever, ended up in court. One of Sorkin, the second part of his quote was, "When the playing field is leveled and the process is fair and open, it turns out we do have term limits. They're called elections." West Wing, great TV. So my suggestion is that while term limits are an approach, Councillor Carroll talked about electoral reform. I think the bigger focus should be on making the electoral process, governance, fair, transparent, and leveling the playing field. How do you do that? People talked about election finances. Do we do away with the rebate program? Sure, do away with that, but compensate people by the number of votes they get to a minimum standard. You get 5% of the support in your election, you get a per vote subsidy. The federal government's used it, other people have used those kind of things. Is there a way to deal with the incumbent advantage? Sure. No more endorsements. You can't publish them. You can go seek them. You can talk about them, but you can't publish them. Because there is a perception that says, boy, if this guy thinks he's good and I don't know much about that candidate, I could be swayed, I could be coerced. So are there a number of different ways you can address electoral reform? Sure there is. I am not a great fan of representative democracy. No disrespect. I much, much prefer participatory democracy. I like the idea of citizen assemblies. I like that, citizen juries they're called. Ireland used it to sort out the abortion issue. And it was effective, and it was good. And there's a company in Toronto that does them better than probably anybody in the world. So you have resources. So my 2 cents, term limits are good if they address a particular problem, but trust us, level the playing field. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for joining us. The next speaker is Patience Evbagharu. Is Patience here? No. Councillor Bradford, you're up.
Awesome. Through the chair, and I don't know if I say that over here, but thank you very much for having me here today, and thanks to everyone on the committee for considering and having this conversation. I think it's a really important one, and I appreciated the clerk's commentary earlier, reiterating sort of the mandate of the committee, and I think that's what this morning's discussion has really been about. What are we here to do? What are you here to do? And what is that going to look like over the next year? And I suggested in the motion, and I appreciate Councillor Balau's assistance with this, bringing this forward for me here at the committee, is that this is something that we could look at. This is something that we could talk about and have a report on, and address some of those questions and the points that the Deputant Allen just made, I think are very valid things to consider and something that we could look at through this process. I want to say it is a process, and it's something that's, I'm very open to considering other ideas. When this came forward, I actually spoke with clerks and talked about a number of different things, and I think at that time we were still trying to determine this committee on governance versus electoral reform, and I know the city's looked at that in a number of different ways. That's for the committee, as we heard, to decide and to consider, but I think that this and other things could address some of the challenges that we're facing here in Toronto. I'm not advocating for one particular solution. This is an option, but I think it could be coupled with a suite of other solutions that might really address some of the challenges that our democracy faces here in Toronto. So when you look at our council demographics, this is something that we're all very familiar with, but this is who's represented. Barely 1/5 of council, of course, is a visible minority. More than 2/3 of council is male. And you contrast that with Toronto's population, 51.5% being born somewhere else or visible minorities, women being around 50% of the population, and you would say, like, our council doesn't really reflect that. Dave Nesland, I'm not sure if he's still here, but he had that great graphic and would talk about how council really looks like the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I think that you sort of see that here as well. The incumbency bias, and a lot of people talk about this, and this is voter turnout that, in our 2018 election by ward. And, it doesn't just hurt, I think incumbency bias doesn't just hurt voter participation, but it also adds insurmountable challenges for many first-time candidates. And that is not necessarily what we're all hearing right now, but I definitely heard that in my race there were 16 candidates, and that was an open ward race. I think when you talk to people, and that'll be important for this committee to go out and have that robust consultation process, but talking to people, it is a challenge, an incumbency bias, and you look at different wards historically and voter turnout rates, and you wonder, like, are there reasons that people aren't going out? Are there reasons that people aren't engaging? And what are those? And I'm not suggesting that they're one thing or another, but that's hopefully something that this committee will be looking at. So if you look at 2010 election, 90% of incumbents won their seat in council again. 3% challenger candidates were successful. If you look at the 2014 election, it was a little bit more of a shakeup. 85% of candidates, of incumbents returned. 15% were new. I think that this election was also, we had much higher turnout, which is a positive thing. It was also, there was a bit more buzz around the mayoral race in that election as well. But you had higher voter turnouts, and you had more challenger candidates that came to City Hall. Last year's election, it goes back, a bit of a regression there, back to 4% versus 96% of incumbents. You guys know this. We're all elected officials. We're all here. We understand. But I think most of us agree that there is a challenge here. You may not agree with this as a solution, and it's very easy and convenient to say we have term limits, we have elections. I understand that. But I think when we look at some of the data here, there's definitely challenges to bringing new people to council, to having more women, more LGBTQ candidates, more visible minorities, more youth on council. That's not the outcome that we're getting. If you go back to 2003, and you look at we've had 167 council races since 2003. Only 13 of them have been won by challenger candidates. So that's, again, with numbers like this, I think it's easy for people to understand that there is a problem.
Just Councillor Bradford, I'll just give you a warning. The clock is malfunctioning there, so I'll give you a few seconds here to wrap up. Given
so we can,
Yeah,
we've got time limits. Yeah, so fair enough. The recommendation is
time
there.
limits, not term limits.
We're asking for a report. I think that as part of the recommendation, it really is there are other jurisdictions that have done this, New York and LA in particular as cities, and what they saw was 50% women on council, 50% visible minorities. Let's look at other jurisdictions. Let's have that conversation. Let's have a report as part of a bigger conversation, and that might be helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Given that Councillor Bradford is signed up to be to depute, we can ask him questions. Are there any questions from visiting members of council? Councillor Carroll.
You raised the examples of New York and LA, so I have to ask the question. I don't know if you've had this conversation with your community, but they're not crazy about the idea. By and large, I find that Torontonians are not crazy about the idea of actually having an overt party system at the municipal level. Mm-hmm. And they might look into this a number of years ago. I don't know if it's still true. Statistically, it was then. I had a university student look at this for us. If there isn't a party system when you institute term limits, it arrives 1 or 2 elections later. They seem to go hand in hand. I'm wondering if you looked at that and you have any thoughts.
Yes, I do have thoughts on that. I would say, like in the US, it's a little different in that people run with either a D or an R behind their name anyways, regardless of the level of government. Even trustee, they do that. So that's sort of like plainly stated for everyone, and the party system is such there that I don't know if that would directly translate to our experience here. It's something to look at. I think that there are groups of people who work together on a consistent basis at City Hall on all sides of the spectrum, and that takes place. The risk or the concern around a party system, I suppose, would be, do you have parties or organizations outside of the council chamber, because it's nonpartisan and we don't have a party system here, but are there organizations that are preparing or grooming candidates for when that seat would open up? And I would suggest that happens today anyways.
Absolutely, it does. But are you familiar with the way that machine works in New York City? Since that was one of the places you looked at, is there's a very hardened system, because there are term limits. There's very much a party succession plan, and who gets the job is the person who can raise the most money, and where they raise the money from doesn't matter until they're in. And even once they are in, for the 2 years they're there, they get their menu money, their $1 million a year that they use in PB. the amount isn't consistent ward to ward. It's based on how much money the mayor knows you can raise. He decides how much menu money you're going to get. That's how entrenched it is. And he has a succession plan for when you're gone, who's the next best fundraiser. It's quite entrenched.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think the outcome, and New York just re-examined this and revised their terms. I think they went to 2 terms now in 2010, and the outcome of that was all of these challenges that I think most of us here would like to address: more women on council, more LGBTQ, more visible minorities, and some democratic renewal. That's what's happening. I think that the situation that you're describing now, and endorsements, I benefited from endorsements, other people benefited from party support, support from special interest groups, unions, like that stuff does happen in Toronto. I don't think that term limits amplifies that more than we actually honestly see it today anyways. But I think what it does do is address some of the challenges that we were talking about.
Question? Okay. Councillor Perks, question.
Thank you for the presentation. You obviously put a lot of work into it, and I see you had some numbers up about only 5% in one election and only 15% in another. What percentage of councillors at the end of last term had served 3 terms or fewer?
I'd have to get that number for you.
Was it higher than 35%?
Do you have the answer to this?
Yes, it was higher than 35%.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
So
Thank you, Councillor Perks. Any other questions?
That had served more than 3 terms? Okay.
Councillor McKelvey is the visiting councillor. Please go ahead and speak. Actually, I'm sorry. I did remiss. Are there any questions of staff on this item? There are none. Are there any questions of staff on this item? Okay, thank you. Councillor McKelvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm here to speak in favor of Councillor Bradford's motion and thank him for his leadership on the important issue of term limits. I'm happy to pledge today that I will serve no more than 3 terms as City Councillor. By knowing my term as councillor is limited to 12 years, I'm able to set an ambitious plan and vision for Ward 25, Scarborough Rouge Park, that has clear timelines. As a candidate and community leader, I faced the power of incumbency twice. The first time resulting in a narrow loss, and the second time resulting in a narrow win. Incumbency has always been a challenge, but now it is twice the challenge, with twice the geography and twice the population. I think of my children's friends who in 12 years might be ready to pursue public office and community service. I think of the next generation of young leaders who need to have hope that there will be the opportunity for them to serve our city. I look forward to reading the information that would come from this report. Positive support and outcomes for term limits are easily found on the internet. I read that in Arlington, Texas, 63% of voters supported 3 terms in a referendum. Dozens of other U.S. municipalities supported term limits by wide margins in 2018. I want to know through this report how term limits have altered the political system and the quality of decision-making. I also want to know how term limits have increased diversity and representation with respect to age, gender, and ethnicity. A vote against this motion today is a vote against renewal, change, equality in the future. I hope you support it.
Thank you. Any members of the committee wishing to speak? Councillor Perks.
Yeah, I'm going to move a motion to defer this item indefinitely. I think actually I'd like to start with something Councillor McKelvey said. Yes, in certain referenda and in public opinion polls, people do say, yeah, I would like to see term limits. The astonishing thing is, though, that when they actually go out to vote for who they want, they will often vote for someone who's had 3 terms or more. Interesting. Like if you put it as an abstract and don't actually relate it to how people want to be represented in a given election, you get 2 different answers, right? Because if everybody in Toronto wanted to limit the terms of city councillors, no one would ever win a 3rd or 4th or 5th term. So obviously, what people say in public opinion polls and referenda is different from how they actually vote in elections. One of the things that I find fascinating about this whole conversation is that any member of council who believes in term limits is absolutely free today to do what Councillor McKelvey just did and say, okay, I'm only serving 2 or 3 terms. The thing that's interesting is when they say, and everyone else has to follow that rule too. Effectively what they're saying is the voters in wards other than mine keep making a mistake. They're wrong. The one thing that we as elected officials must never, ever, ever do is say that the voters are wrong. We're only here because of the voters. Yes, the electorate has the right to elect people who are terrible at governance. Yes, the electorate has the right to change their minds and vote way left and then way right. It's up to them. And the one fundamental rule that elected officials have to follow is that they're right. The voters are always right. Now, we can look at some trends and we can say that, you know, at a specific moment in time, only 5% of people challenging won. But if you actually look over a couple of election cycles and with retirements, very nearly half of the council that we had at the end of last term had served only 1, 2, or 3 terms. So that renewal process does take place unless you're just picking a specific data point and not looking at over the whole 3-term period. The other thing that's quite important to talk about is what is the value of having what was referred to as institutional memory. When I was first elected to City Council, I was awed. I had never in my life had to experience such a steep learning curve. We run a $12 billion entity here, the largest employer in the City of Toronto. Our services touch people from the moment they wake up in the morning to the moment they go to bed at night. And while they're sleeping, we keep the city safe for them as well. Getting my head around all that was helped by 2 things. Kyle Ray taught me how to read a budget, and Howard Moscow taught me how to read a council agenda. And it is absolutely true. Kyle taught me what questions you ask the public service in the department, what questions you ask the financial planners, how you communicate and hear from your constituents, and put it all together in a budget. Without being paired with him to review that budget, I was on the budget committee in my first term, I would not have been able to be even half as effective. Even today, I still rely on lessons I've learned there. And some of you have at times pointed out that I tend to be a bit of a nerd about how decisions are made and how the procedures work at council. I don't know if I hope that some library somewhere has one of Howard's old agendas. They were artworks with stickies and highlighted highlighters and different colors, and like they were just beautiful things. And from him, I taught that actually following issues through over time, knowing their history, knowing that 15 years ago we considered the same item and came to this outcome for these reasons, made him better, and learning from him made me better. So I'm afraid, you know, if you believe in term limits, don't run for a 4th term. But don't decide the voters in wards that you represent have to be told who to vote for.
Thank you. We do have a question from Councillor Carroll of the Mover.
I do have a question. It's a procedural question. Maybe I should be asking a clerk, but one of the benefits of Councillor Perks's experience is he's a walking procedural binder. Is it your intention, if you, I was thinking refer it to the big general report, but by deferring it today, council could seize themselves of the matter and bring it back when they're ready for it after they've seen all that.
Council or committee.
Or a committee.
It could come
a
back.
Majority of the committee could
Well,
seize
Councillor, actually it could come back in 3 or 4 different ways. One way it could come back is that there could be a procedural motion on the floor of council at any time over the next year to remove the item from committee. Another is that this committee at any time can decide that they want to bring it forward again. That's why it's called defer indefinitely. We may decide 2 meetings from now that we want to consider it.
Okay.
The other thing is that after this year expires, the issue becomes live again.
Okay, yes, that informs my comments. I'll put me down to speak, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll, you wanted to speak.
I'm the
I'm sorry, did you?
I'm glad I asked that question because I can support the deferral. My intention was going to be to say, can we refer this to that general grouping so that it doesn't have added weight over and above those things. But if Councillor Perks wants to do it that way, we can bring it back when we have seen that. And the reason I want to do that is this. What I heard was attributing to term limits some of the things that are admirable about other councils. There are some amazingly diverse people in New York City Council. I just don't happen to think it's about their term limits. I am passionately convinced that it is about their campaign finance authority. There is a person down there who has just finished serving 2 terms of council. His name's Jumani Williams. He was raised in the poorest section of Brooklyn with absolutely no connections whatsoever. He is a man of color, Caribbean by descent, and he has a profound stutter, a profound communication deficit, and yet was passionately adored by his supporters. And boy, did they cry at his going away party. I saw some video of it on Twitter. He should not be leaving them when he was leaving them. They were desperately upset. He ran for Congress, so, you know, maybe. But here's the thing. It's the campaign finance reform that allowed him to get in. There are 5, 6, maybe even 7 elections now into a period of time where they don't have rebates, where 18 months later, you're going to give a check back to the people who could fork over $100 or $750 or $1,200. You get to go to a community and say, give me $25. And you bundle up those $25 and you take them into the Campaign Finance Authority and they give the candidate the $75 up front. And the caveat to that is you have to disclose up front who your donors are, and then you have to go through an audit, and you go through it 6 times during the election year, and a week before Election Day, all of it goes online, so that the voter knows not only who you are, but have you been compliant and straight throughout this election year, and who's backing you. And that's in exchange for having that very easy way of raising funds. And that way of raising funds made it possible for Jumani to run. That made it possible for Melissa Mark Vivarito, who just finished serving as the House Speaker, despite having been born in one of the toughest parts of Harlem. But she served as Mayor de Blasio's Speaker. That type of fundraising would completely and utterly change the face of politics in Toronto. And would it cost a little more? Yeah, it would cost a little more. It was studied once a long time ago. But it seems to have changed politics such that the cost of running it that way has slowly come down over the years. And we're at an opportune moment. Do you remember Mark using the word, or Victor, I should say, using the word opportunity over and over again? We have an opportunity where the cost of running an election for 44 campaigns is going to drop to 25. If there is a bump up in cost in doing a grant program instead of a rebate program, then this is the moment to do it because the envelope is changing. And I want to see a report that contemplates that before I decide on term limits. So I'll support the deferral because I've just checked. When I've seen that report, if we still want to do term limits, there's a way to bring it back to this committee or to bring it back to council by a vote. But I really want to see the report in the first item first. And I hope it contemplates such innovative solutions as the one I just described, and I know there are many more, that really do create diversity and gender balance. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bailao, you had indicated you wish to speak. Just going to move the recommendations of the letter to the committee. Okay. Thank you, and I will speak very, very briefly. I just wish to consider this item in the context of the breadth of things that we heard earlier today that have to do with governance. As the chair of the committee, I really want to make sure that we deliver on the mandate that we've been given. And I just want to take a moment to remind the committee members and those listening that, we've got a year's time to come back with some advice to council about our governance and about the input that we've been given as to whether or not the structure is going to function going forward or going not. And we're going to have to learn during that year's time, but we're also going to have to get a lot of work done during that year's time. And members of council around this table know that a year passes very, very quickly. In casting your vote on this, please be considerate of all that we need to do as a committee and figure out where this sits on the spectrum of governance and how close to the center you would put it as to what might be the core thing to look at here in terms of governance, or if it's something larger. And, with that context, the resources to deliver the information on this and the report are finite, and please exercise care. So with that, I'm just going to get some advice from the clerk on the sequence of the motions. Councillor Perks is defer indefinitely, I guess, comes sequentially first. No, Councillor Bailao had moved the items from the letter, the adoption. So Councillor Perks, yours is sequentially first. So I'm going to ask all of those in favor and a recorded vote on that. Councillor Perks?
All those in favor of deferring indefinitely. Councillor Holliday, Councillor Carroll, Councillor Perks. All opposed, Councillor Bailao. That motion carries. The other motion is redundant.
Thank you to everyone for today's meeting, as that is the end of the agenda. We are now adjourned.